Tēnā koutou katoa, haere mai ki tēnei hui, te iwi o rangata nei tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. I will just get us through some housekeeping before we officially launch into this morning's culture and sport meeting. So, this meeting is being recorded and will be live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. The health and safety requirements for this building are shown on the screens here in the chamber. So just take a moment to familiarise yourselves with those. I'm not sure how many online participants we have today, but any will be keeping their cameras turned on and microphones muted. We expect our technology to work well. It's my first time driving it, so a little patience might be required as we get there. Presenters, if you could give your name before speaking and use the microphone just so that anybody watching online is aware of who's contributing. Okay, that is the housekeeping. I'll just open us with a karakia. Tū tawa mai I runga, tū tawa mai I raro, tū tawa mai I roto, tū tawa mai I waho, kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, homie, huie, tai kie. Thank you. And of course, this week is Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori. So we'll be trying through the course of this meeting to extend some of our kupu and use some different words maybe as we go. But as we get started, I've asked our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Marshall Lobb, to give a reflection on the importance of Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori in this council context.
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair, e te rangatira o te rā, koutou katoa ngā rangatira o te rā. Karanga te rā, karanga te kaupapa o te rā nei. Ai, ka tika, ko tēnei tētahi wiki whakahirahira mō tātou te iwi Māori o te rā mā tātou katoa. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for giving me this opportunity to say a few words about Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, but reflections on Palmerston North City Council and how we do things. And I think the very fact that you started with a karakia and a mihi says a great deal. And also that you took the initiative to provide us with te reo phrases in the chamber. And I certainly, along with Councillor Fitzgerald of Rangitane, are very grateful to you, to our colleagues and to the staff. So I would like to mention a few things, wonderful things going on. In the library, we've got displays of kaupapa Māori books in Te Reo Māori, and those that aren't in Te Reo Māori talk about our heritage, talk about things that are related to a Māori worldview, and they're there for young and old, which is fantastic. Not to mention the wonderful sounds of the Waiata anthems will be playing all week in there, so if you want to hear some really melodic sounds with beautiful kupu, they're there also. So it really sets a scene for something pretty special. Also, we have Rapua Te Kurahuna, which is a Find the Hidden Treasures activity that will be going on all of Mahuru. Mahuru is September, and for the staff, I believe you have until Friday to get your competition entries in. But it's a wonderful way of young and old exploring Te Marae o Hine, which is really unique to us here in Palmerston North because of the special relationship we have with Te Marae o Hine, the whakapapa that goes back. If I was to sort of talk about that a lot more, we'd be here till midnight, so I better leave that. But I do want to acknowledge certain staff who helped create that, and that's the play advisor, Manumia Jury, along with the Māori advisory team. And I also acknowledge behind me is the Māori Principal Advisor, Todd Taiapa, tēnā koe pā Todd. Kōrua ko Leon Tufunga, te pau tautoko mo te reo Māori, me ngā kaupapa Māori, tēnā koe Leon. Whaia Huatahi Nuku, who is in the library, who's been one of the longest serving staff members of Palmerston North, and perhaps in times when Māori wasn't so prominent, and even when people were probably actively trying to keep it suppressed, Huatahi, Todd and others who have been here for a long time were fighting behind the scenes to ensure that it had prominence, that it was respected and honoured. So I'd like to acknowledge Carla Wickham as well in the library, and Christina Winitana. Now, the cool thing about Palmerston North City Council is that we have, with regards to te reo Māori and tikanga, here we see it in the council all the time. We start our hui with karakia, we finish with karakia, we follow tikanga that is embraced and supportive of all our operations. So our communication, internally and externally, our documentation, and also our professional learning development here is very prominent and supports staff and others knowing more about te reo Māori and kaupapa Māori. So I also acknowledge the Chief Executive and his wonderful team, because wherever you go, the staff here at Palmerston North City Council embrace that. And no matter where they are on their journey, they're actually giving it a go. We love that. Also, I know on Thursday, there is Te Wā Tuku Reo Māori, which the Māori Language Commission have been having for a few years now, but they want 1 million people at noon on Thursday to log in, sign in, do something and record it, and then we can say they're doing something to honour, whether that be a waiata, a kōrero, a game in te reo Māori. There's a whole lot of things that we could do. And our staff and any of our councillors or members of the public can go to the library at about 11:45 on Thursday and get ready to boogie down to Tūtira Mai Ngā Iwi. As a way of unifying us all, symbolising and celebrating that occasion. So Palmerston North City Council staff and councillors, and also Palmerston North City-wide, thank you for honouring te reo Māori. And I see Pa Warren at the back there, Warren Warbrick, tēnā koe te rangatira, o tira tēnā tātou katoa, kia kaha. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Kia ora, kia kaha te reo Māori. So moving on with our order of business today, ane ngā whakapaha. Now we'll move to the apologies. We have an apology from the Mayor for early departure. Is there anything to add to that? And late arrival, yes. He's omnipresent, I'm sure. With nothing else to add, I will move that, seconded by Councillor Meehan, and I will ask you to vote. Carried unanimously. Thank you. I have no notification of additional items or declarations of interest. Speak now, forever hold your peace. No? Okay, good. We do have this morning public comment on item 10 on the agenda, which is the report about options to change the Palmerston North City coat of arms. And I'll invite Warren Warbrick to come down to the table there beside Councillor Johnson. Right, your microphone should be on there, Warren, so.
Oh, kia ora, everyone.
Kia ora.
Okay, sorry, I've got a lot to say in a very short amount of time. I'd like to say that I'm here representing also my cousin Wiramu Kingi Te Awe Awe as head of the Te Awe Awe family, and they are also the traditional leaders of Ngāti Hina Aute and Tarangi Te Paia Hapus of Rangitane. Oops, sorry. So in 2.9 of the report, it references John Bevan Ford as being senior lecturer at Massey, and yes he was, but additional to that is that at the time he was also designated as the tohunga whakairo for Rangitane, and at that time also I was assigned to be his apprentice, so I was kind of privy to quite a lot of the discussions that he had with our people at the time, especially in the symbolism of this piece of work. If you look at the crest there, the Māori chief there was originally modelled on Te Peti Te Awe Awe, and then later our people wished it to be a more generic form of rangatira. Now you see in his hand he has a mere pounamu. The mere pounamu was very significant to us because this one actually is a symbol of a mere pounamu that was one of three that recognised the peacemaking that happened at a place called Tūwhakatupua. And the one that we held was called Tāne Nui Ārangi. So this one represents Tāne Nui Ārangi. For us as a people, we see the crest as being a strong symbol of our relationships with council and our bicultural way of being. So on that note, on having discussions with my cousin Wiramu, we would like to see the crest stay as it is and no change to happen. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Warren, for coming in to bring us that comment today. That will be really useful till we get to the debate later on. Thank you.
Kia ora.
So there's the motion in front of us to receive the public comment for information. I will test you all now. He kaitiape mo tēnei motini. Councillor Johnson would like to move the motion. He kai totoko. Councillor Meehan will second the motion. Kua tai ki te wā mō te pōti. Now is the time to vote. Carried unanimously, thank you. Now we move to the part of our agenda where we receive presentations, and there are 3 presentations for us this morning. We're going to start with a presentation from the Special Olympics team. We're here in the gallery with us today, and I see wearing a lot of medals, so we look forward to hearing about your successes. I'll invite Olwyn Humphreys and Carla Lehulier, who are the Special Olympics team coaches, to come down to where the microphone is illuminated. So we have 10 minutes for the presentation, and within that 10 minutes, if you finish early, then there'll be a little bit of time for questions. Hand over to you. Thank you for being with us today. Kia ora.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for having us here. We've waited a while, but we're here. Bear with me. At the beginning of June, a team of 7 from Manawatu left Palmy to meet up with the rest of the New Zealand team in Auckland to start our 30-hour journey to Germany for the Special Olympics World Summer Games in Berlin. Our team consisted of 39 athletes and 22 coaches, support staff. This was the biggest sporting event of 2023, with more than 170 countries competing, 7,000 athletes, 3,000 coaches, and 20,000 volunteers. These 4 athletes were selected from Manawatu, They are Jamie Davidson, who competed in athletics. Jamie, do you want to stand up and show your medals? Jamie received the silver for his 100 metres, the bronze for his relay. He also should have got a gold. He competed in the mini javelin and he threw so well he was disqualified. So that was heartbreaking. Josh, who was part of the 10-pin team. And Josh received the bronze for pairs. Was it the 6th for teams, Josh? Singles. And the teams one was another bronze. It was a long, hard competition and very hot conditions for Josh. Thank you, Josh. Jesse, who was part of the swim team, and Carla as his coach will speak to that.
This is me. I thought she was still talking. Jessie got a bronze in the 25 free. I might have got that the wrong way. In the 50 free, bronze in the 4x25 metre freestyle relay, and a 5th in the 25 freestyle. But the really good thing was he personal best in every race he had, which had 9 races. So he PB'd every single time he swam, which was absolutely amazing for an oldie. He's getting old, but he did really well.
And then we had Hayden, who was part of the 3x3 unified basketball team. This is the first time we've ever competed in this sport. It's not something we do here. They got a 4th, which was amazing because they were playing against teams that have played together for more than a year. They had, I think, 3 weekend camps and a few days in Germany before they played. They played amazingly well. Well done. And just to add to that, unified sport is where a Special Olympics athlete plays alongside a non-Special Olympics athlete. It's really difficult in a sport like this. We also had in our team Nicole, who is an amazing doctor who can't make it today. Carla was the coach of the swim team. Olwen, was one of 4 support staff. Before the game started, we had several days in a host town program in Munich. We had an amazing experience being hosted by 3 municipalities, Garching, where our accommodation was, Unterföhring and Ismaning. These wonderfully generous people created so many memories for us. We were entertained and we got the chance, we were hosted at civic receptions by the mayors of all 3 municipalities. We visited a school, we were entertained, and we got the chance to tell the students about us and our country. We went to a beer garden where some of our athletes fell asleep. They were drinking apple juice. We visited a palace, had fabulous activities arranged for us, did a tour of the city on a hop-on, hop-off bus, experienced traditional music and dance, visited a planetarium where once again there was a lot of snoring when the lights went out, and we were fed a lot. There was lots of food involved in our trip. We also managed a few training sessions in excellent venues our hosts had arranged for us, and we performed our new haka and waiata several times at functions. After a wonderful time in Munich, we had to say our farewells with more music and gifts for us to start on our 10-hour bus trip to Berlin. It was a long but pleasant journey with several stops on the way for food, a chance to stretch our legs, and for us to all be challenged in how to access the pay toilets. We were given great accommodation in Berlin, which we shared with teams from several countries, including the US, Great Britain and Australia, and the Faroe Islands. Our hotel was next door to a train station, so many of us decided to travel to our sports venues on public transport. German public transport is incredibly efficient, so I don't think anyone was ever late for anything, correct? No. The way the game schedule was arranged, we still had time for sightseeing and shopping, and as we are intrepid Kiwis, we went everywhere, but this time independent of the larger team. We went off in smaller groups according to sports. Public transport was free for us, so the whole time that gave us all more money for shopping and eating out if we wanted.
Not everyone did shopping, by the way.
The day of the opening ceremony finally arrived and it was worth the wait. It was at the Olympia Stadium, which has not hosted an Olympic event since 1936. So it made it even more special when the Olympic flame was lit after the torch was run into the stadium by 4 very enthusiastic Special Olympics athletes. The walk through the tunnel into the stadium was mind-blowing as we all realised how huge this event was. There were tears and very happy faces as we saw and heard our families and supporters in the stands. 2 of the mayors from the host town program surprised us. They'd come from Berlin to accompany us into the stadium, all decked out in their traditional costumes, their lederhosen and flash hats. The next day we started competition and the Healthy Athletes program also began. That's when we really started getting into our earlier starts and later finishes. We had great breakfast to start the day and good nourishing food at our sports venues, so we coped all right. At the end of every day after a good dinner and much needed showers, we had our team meeting to discuss the highs and lows of the day, what uniform items were needed for the next day, and tēnei o was presented. Tēnei o is a taonga made in the image of the manaia on our uniforms and was presented to someone each day who had done something special, not necessarily in their sport. Most often it was awarded because someone had stood out for their kindness, helpfulness, compassion, or sportsmanship. It was always a very hard choice as throughout the day we as coaches were sending nominations through, as this 2023 New Zealand team were an exceptional group of athletes. This team had the biggest medal haul to date of all our games, of 5 golds, 17 silver and 12 bronze. It also needs to be mentioned that beyond the medal count, our athletes smashed many personal bests, learned so much of what they were capable of, and developed lifelong friendships and bonds along the way. Our athletes are selected for these games not only for their sporting abilities but also for their resilience. Attending these games has meant undertaking the longest journey many of our athletes have ever made, whilst being away from their families and loved ones for 3 weeks. The team as a whole strengthened their bonds, supported one another in attaining individual success, while also supporting teammates through disappointment. Our athletes all embodied our Special Olympics oath, which is, let me win, but if I cannot win, let me be brave in the attempt. They all made us so incredibly proud, and as a country, we can be proud of them.
If I can, I'm just going to jump in here as well. So I'm Carla, and I was the head swim coach. This was my second World Games. The thing that I found really amazing about these games was, starting with the host town program, we actually really got a chance to meet locals, get out there, and they had such amazing support of all of our teams. So people were assigned to each team, but they came to every training and they came to every trip we went on, and got to know all of our athletes really well. And then several of them actually travelled to Berlin and went around every single sport, and they could tell you, even people that weren't there have messaged me and said, wow, it's so good that Jessie got 2 bronze medals and somebody got medals in this, and they knew every sport who had got medals in their town. So they took such a huge interest in our athletes, and I think our athletes responded really, really well to that. One of the things that I think bonded this team more than we've had in our last experience was that they had organised a day of sport with one of the local high schools, and they had many, many different sports, very random things, down to football, volleyball, rock climbing, archery, some kind of weird wicket ball thing, ribbon gymnastics, and you could go around and try them, but you were trying them, judo, you were trying them with the local children. And everybody got out there and tried every sport, didn't matter what they played, and got in with the locals. But that also bonded our team together, which was something I thought was missing in the games I went to before. So we were such a really good, close-knit team. As a swimmer, I'm used to going to the games and not moving out of the swimming pool for the entire games because we're there the whole time. This time we did get a couple of half-day breaks, and instead of sightseeing and shopping, we went to visit other sports. So we went to bocce and we went to powerlifting on our days off, which was really great. And because the transport was really good, we could jump on a train and get ourselves there without getting lost, which was amazing. So I think another thing that bonded our team, since it's, we're talking about Te Reo, is we had Te Reo practice every day, and we had a special haka that embodied our oath. And so for about an hour every day, we practiced the haka and a variety of other songs that we did. And we probably didn't perform those as much as I think we should have, considering the practice, because by the end of it, we were pretty good at that. And a lot of athletes that normally would not step up were up in the front row really going hard. So I think that was probably an amazingly well bonded team that went away and travelled together. And even, are we 3 months later, are still all in contact
That's amazing.
with each other, which I think is really amazing. And I think, as Owen said, these bonds will stay as, you know, for a long, long time. And I think a lot of the people fundraised this time to get money to go. It cost the athletes, well, it cost the athletes and the club $18,000 per person to go. Now, the athletes didn't have to pay that much. The Special Olympics Club paid more than half. The athletes paid $7,000 and clubs paid the rest. So we had four athletes that went, sorry, brain's a bit dead. So that was a lot of hard work for the club raising money, but also a lot of hard work for the athletes. So, but they had a lot of community support because a lot of people realised that they were raising this money to go. So I think a lot more people in the community were aware this time that we were actually going away, because they had been raising money in Paeatua and they'd been raising money all around Palmerston North for these particular athletes. And plus we also got some TV coverage and news coverage this time, which we haven't had before.
Thank you for coming in to share that. I'm afraid we've run over the time
we?
for your presentation.
Goodbye.
And I feel like you could tell us a lot of stories about what went on your trip. But thank you so much for coming in. Thank you for bringing your medals to show us today. And congratulations on a wonderful campaign and for representing us so very well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. The recommendation there is the Culture and Sport Committee receive the presentation for information. He kai tau toko. Councillor Meehan, thank you. We're just leaving. I really like that, let me win or be brave in the attempt. A challenge to us all, I think, there. Thank you so much for coming in. Kua tae ki te wā mō te poti. Now's the time to vote. Kia ora, carried unanimously. Thank you. Our second presentation is from Palmerston North Heritage Trust. I'll invite Margaret Tennant to come and share with us her thoughts. We have a PowerPoint, I think, do we, for Margaret?
Kia ora koutou. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I was keen for the Palmerston North Heritage Trust, and I think we really do need to get a Māori language name as well. I was keen for us to make a report because we are actually the Heritage Trust is a council trust, and we are the committee is simply administers it on behalf of the council. So we did actually used to have a councillor sitting on the committee, but councillors being busy people, that seems to have faded long ago. Anyway, the PowerPoint shows what our official object is, and particularly that of maintaining and preserving archival and other material of historical significance. And I'll return to that at the end of the presentation, because some of the points we want to make very much do relate to archives in the city. The next PowerPoint does show, do I drive that or does somebody else? Oh, I do. Is that what this? Oh, here, sorry. Oh, sorry. Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
I think we're driving it from here now, Margaret.
Oh, okay, good, good. So we just note there's some of our past activities which many councillors will be aware of, but we were behind the publication City at the Centre, and a number of our members did actually write for it. I've underlined the obtaining funds for, but because we are a trust and registered with the Charities Commission, so we are able to get funding for small projects, and that is perhaps something that can be helpful in various ways, and we have done it in the past, including the professional cataloguing of Ian Matheson's archive. Our present activities, good, thank you, is that we do have this annual meeting of history and heritage groups, which I'll also return to because some recommendations or concerns came out of that. The annual Local Historian of the Year award to Jill White, and it was a wonderful one, and Jill was absolutely thrilled to get it, so it was wonderful to see that happen. A biennial prize for the best article on the history of the Manawatu. Alternate years we have a book and so on. I'll just note the bit I've highlighted in yellow, because this is something new we're doing, helped along by Warren and Virginia Warbrick. There's the new history syllabus, primary school history syllabus you may know about. One of the problems is a lot of the focus of it is national, and we want to inject local materials in because our history is distinctive, including our Rangitane history, but also other aspects of being a city at the centre, as our history said. So we've been meeting, thanks with some assistance from library staff as well. We've been working with teachers, practicing historians, working with teachers, because there is this disjunction between what the historians know, which is quite in-depth knowledge, and how you actually convey that to primary school children. So there needs to be a meeting place, and what we're trying to do is to take a topic, and currently we're working on deforestation, and see how we can translate that into a resource for teachers. And it's actually quite challenging. Everyone thinks, oh yes, we need local material in there, but doing it in a form that's both, that doesn't oversimplify, but is actually able to be understood or taught at the appropriate levels is the big challenge. Our annual calendar, I note there, is out, so you can get a copy from the library should you want a calendar depicting, and this year, Manawatu's music makers. So please do pop along to the library if you don't already have a copy. Which gets me to what I really want to talk about. Some of the issues and concerns that came out of our meeting of history groups. Now, the bigger group did extend to including groups from Fielding and the wider Manawatu, but it was a meeting that brought together genealogists and history practitioners of various kinds, plus those who look after historical materials, or who advocate for different kinds of history. And this brings us back, I think, to the Palmerston North Heritage Trust's initial remit, although we've extended beyond that. Quite a lot of concern about the lack of a city archivist and the need for more than just one archivist assistant. And many of us are now being affected by this. It takes quite a long while to retrieve archives. I ordered something early last week. and I hope to get it in a day or so, but, the staff are very helpful and do their utmost, but there's now a booking system for getting archives. But also, I think Palmerston North in the past has been very special in the archives front because it's a place where the council agreed that not only the statutory archives should be collected, but also community archives. And for a historian like me, and for genealogists, and for all those working on our heritage, and we're all volunteers, it means that you work in a very particular and very, I think, useful kind of way, because you move between these two kinds of archive. You don't, I can go one day and I'm looking at something from the community archive. The next I'll be looking at something from a council committee or a report from planners. And then I can go to the shelves in the heritage section of the library and look for a memoir which sheds some light on it, or I can check something that's actually there in written form. And it enables you, I think, to give a much more rounded and appropriate view of whatever you're writing about. So I think in terms of keeping on with Ian Matheson's legacy, I can just urge that, you do support not just that facility, but having a trained and a person to run the archive and to foster the collection of archives, because that's the other problem we have. The Heritage Trust is trying to encourage groups to donate to the community archive, and particularly we want to do an actual drive for business archives, because they're being ditched all over the place as businesses fold or whatever. But what's the point if there's a backlog and nowhere much to put them, because there isn't the space? So, here we're looking to get materials for the future. And I think there's both the personnel and the space issue here that cause some concern among this particular group. It's the difference, I think, between having an archives repository where the ethos is one of collecting materials and keeping them safe, and having a heritage repository that's friendly to users. I mean, as a historian, I've been to many archives where, yes, they're looking after the stuff well, but you're pointed to a table in the corner. You might even be kicked out at lunchtime while the staff go for their lunch or whatever. But in Palmerston North, we've got a facility where you can go and talk to staff who know the archive. You can move, as I said before, between these various materials. You've got the potential for a true heritage centre, and that's got broader ramifications for the history of the city and the way that it's displayed, researched, promulgated. So we're concerned and would like to see greater provision for easily retrievable archive storage. We're concerned about the backlog and digitisations. I always encourage people to give photographs. They come up to me and say, oh, look, I said, Kev, you had it copied for Manawatu Heritage, but there's a backlog and digitisation there, and it's not just a matter of digitisation, it's a matter of identifying stuff and having accurate information on whatever materials put up on Manawatu Heritage. I think Palmerston North has lost in the recent past opportunities for telling the city's history on the streetscape. Great job with Poppy Places. A lot of people, and there's an app associated with that. Well done. But we would like to see more civilians from our past acknowledged. There's a lot of people who served in World War II who had nothing much to do with the city there. But what about, I can't think of, has Snelson Street got anything on it about the so-called father of our city? I haven't wandered around that way recently, but we need to perhaps do a bit more of that in relation to others who participate in Palmerston North's past and contributed. Something like what there is at Julia Wallace Park is very good. Signage boards are actually, I think you need more signage boards because people love to look at them. They particularly love the past and present kind of photographs. People stop and linger over them, and I think you need a bit more of that. We need a bit more of that. The city doesn't, I don't think, currently have a heritage planner, which I'm also on the Committee for Historic Places Manawatu Horowhenua. We used to be able to go along and have some really good conversations with people who've been in that role for a number of years, but we don't know who to go and talk to right now about heritage buildings, particularly those that are under threat. So they were the main concerns that came out of that meeting. We were very pleased with the earlier recommendation from this committee, that the CE provide an annual report of developments across heritage themes, including military heritage across council programs. I think that's terrific. We need action, of course, as well as reports. So that's where we're coming from, that's what we've been doing, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Margaret. We do have a question from the Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Apologies for lateness. Thanks, Margaret. Music to my ears. Do you need, you opened up and you spoke about the role of the trust and its more admin role, and then able to raise funds, and then there was a councillor on the trust. Do you need more council involvement, or do you think your role as an advisor to us is going okay?
I actually think it's probably going okay as long as we can do a report of this kind. And individual councillors are always very open to conversations, I find, which is great. And the library staff have been wonderful in both facilitating our meetings and the things we do, you know, helping with photocopying and stuff. So as long as we can have that interaction with the heritage team at the library, and report to the council and have those individual conversations with people such as yourself, and you know, we're able to, as you know, to fling off the odd letter. So yeah.
No, we get those. Thank you. You mentioned the archive space, and look, we've got a challenge there, as you know, and I'm not disagreeing with what you've said, but is there a hybrid model where, like some of the main museums use, where they have their more readily taonga, or their items that are regularly looked at or used and researched from, and then maybe some of those items that only get pulled out once every 10 years in a more secure space that might not necessarily be on the same site?
As long as you've got a good retrieval system, and it does dilute the archive. I mean, there's a danger then you split it into bits and pieces according to someone's judgment about, you know, what's relevant and what isn't, and that's always problematic.
Well, you'd rely on professional advice, wouldn't you, to make sure that you had the more readily. I mean, I'm just getting your opinion on it, because there is a challenge there.
I think if we had to, probably someone like me could live with a retrieval system where you book ahead.
So Archive Central, where I'm heading is Archive Central, and where the shared services model, which is used by TAs, and we're the only ones that don't use it, hence we're in the problem we're in.
Yeah, I mean, I think Palmerston North was wise not to go along with the Archive Central model. I mean, my understanding that it was set up on advice from an archivist to assist smaller local bodies that didn't have the resources or to manage their own smaller bodies of material. And Palmerston North and Ponganui stood aside from that. And, you know, I think it's significant that Palmerston are places and Ponganui are places with a strong sense of their own heritage. And
have you been to it? Have you used it?
Yeah, I've been over. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, a drive to Fielding to check a footnote doesn't thrill me, quite frankly.
No, I'm hearing you. That's fine. One more question, and you know, other professional, mainly smaller museums use. They'll have a trained professional, but they do use trained volunteers to get through. You know, I've seen what's downstairs, and you've got decades there to go through. Would you use trained volunteers to perhaps get through some of the...
Depends on the task. I mean, if it's a matter of scanning stuff for digitisation or whatever, there are often professional judgments that I think only a trained person can make. So it depends entirely on the task, and I don't know enough myself about the decisions archivists make and the basis on which they do them. I only know as a user what I want, you know.
Okay. New Zealand Rugby Museum had 40 years worth of backlog, and they used some trained volunteers under an archivist, so.
Sounds a bit like a comment, Mr Mayor,
Yeah,
so
it does.
maybe we'll wrap those
Okay,
questions.
thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Margaret, for the presentation. Just about the lack of a city archivist, that's been quite long-standing, hasn't it? How long have we been without a city archivist?
Well, the role was combined, I understand, with the team leader heritage. So we did have someone who was trained in archives, Leslie Courtney, who's now retired, but she was an archivist and she was trained to do archival roles, but it was combined with the team leader heritage role. And then gradually, as more of that community history stuff expanded, I think our observation from us outside was that the pressures on contraction of the archives role, well, and then it sort of seemed to kind of disappear more recently after Leslie's retirement. So there's a position there that needs filling. So,
Okay. Thank you for that. But it's at least a couple of years, isn't it, since Leslie retired?
Leslie will know, but no, she's
Sorry,
here.
sorry, Leslie. Graduated. It's about 18 months ago. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And I just wondered if there were any good models of archival systems or management of archives that you could point to in other cities or other councils that, if we were needing any inspiration, that we could look to for a good model?
No, I can't. I haven't gone that far, but we could well find out.
Well, it's always helpful to. Oh, I won't stray into a comment and test the chair's patience, but that would be useful, I think. And just last question, you mentioned something that I really identified with, which was the staff having a working knowledge of the archives and how helpful that is. Can you just expand on that? I mean, for a sort of, if I call you like a professional historian as yourself, like you probably have a good idea of the archives yourself, but for, you know, an amateur just going along looking to research a particular interest, how useful is it to have that staff knowledge?
Oh, it's just to know what topics to look under. You know, even if you're doing a digital search on a database, you're often not looking for the right thing because you don't know the terminology that things have been catalogued under. Those who've had the archives go through their hands and in the process of deposit know, and of course in the heritage team they're also collecting materials themselves along the way. So there's that. It's particularly, I think, the knowledge of the way the archives are structured and how you should look. I mean, if I go along to National Archives in Wellington, I quite often have to go and sit with someone at a desk and say, look, I'm looking for this, where do you suggest I go? Because even looking at an electronic database, you're often not looking for quite the right thing in terms of how they've been transmitted and put into storage and so on.
Okay, that's really useful. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora, Margaret. Thank you for the presentation. My question is just one of clarification. On the issues and concerns list there, you speak of lost opportunities. The examples given seem to me to be more unmet rather than actually lost. So are you saying that some things have actually been lost, or simply that there's unmet opportunity there?
Oh, no, sometimes they're actually lost. I think you have to, as Ian Matheson always did, actively go out there and raise consciousness that that stuff you've got under your bed or the stuff you've got in the back of your storeroom in your building, which you're now about to vacate, might actually have a long-term significance. So it is actually things being destroyed. Have I understood your question right?
Yeah, thanks. I was trying to get to the fourth bullet point there where you talked about lost opportunities on streetscape, etc.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, and to me it seemed like your examples were more unmet rather than actually lost, but just wanted to clarify that.
Okay. I suppose it could be up, like in Cuba Street, things could be added. It's just when the development was being done, and particularly in the first stage, there were things that could have been said about Cuba Street, the buildings, the past activities that went on there. there could have been signage and it wasn't there because I did guess it wasn't. Historical interpretation isn't budgeted when you're doing tar seal type thing. I'm sure there's a proper term for that.
And can I ask if the trust has done any thinking about identifying or prioritizing those kind of opportunities in the streetscape of the city, or is that just something that you would like to see the city take on?
We've been in something we'd like to see the city take on, but I think Cuba Street, George Street, I mean, the Savage Crescent historic area, of course, was done some years ago, but that was done by Historic Places, Manawatu Horowhenua, or its predecessor, and that, you know, the signage there is historically, I think, very good, but some of that sort of thing, yeah.
Great, thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Zabelin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ngā mihi Margaret, Moto Kōrero. I'm interested in the digitisation backlog. Particularly, could you tell us about the scope of sort of how much backlog are we talking and what's in there?
Oh, library staff would be better placed for me. I just know as someone who's often said, you know, you need to digitise this, that or the other. It takes quite a while, and we're told that there is a backlog of things waiting to go on Manawatu Heritage, is my understanding. And I assume there's also a backlog of actual archives which could be digitised, but staff don't have the time or resources to do it.
In your experience, do you think a task like that could be something that could be bundled up in a project rather than something that's assigned to a staff member, for example?
Yeah, I suppose one has, depending on where one's applying for funds, you have to be very careful that it's not seen as something the council should be doing as part of its regular activities. But so you're thinking of the trust taking responsibility for a project?
Oh, not necessarily. I'm just I'm curious about whether or not that's something that would be an digitisation as in principle being something that might be a staff thing, but dealing with a backlog could be something that maybe might be dealt with in a sort of targeted project. I just was interested in whether that kind of approach could work.
Yeah, I mean, I think as an external body like us, well, partly external, we'd be more interested in, I think, a big a project that got people to give more rather than arranging for actual digitisation. We have been doing some things. We've been, as I said in one of those points, things like getting some oral history actually transcribed so it makes it easier to use and can go up on Manawatu Heritage, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think there is a possibility of an actual project, but it's certainly I don't know how the library works well enough to say.
Sure. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Kia ora. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Marshall-Lobb.
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair. O tira, tēnā koe, Margaret, o tira koutou katoa tō kapa tō rōpū. Just a big thank you, before I get into my question, for what you and the volunteers do. I wanted to ask about working with teachers, and is it about the designing of units that are appropriate for students across all levels, or is there another concern about rolling out that information so it's useful for all the schools in Palmerston North regarding local history?
I think it's a bit of both. What we're trying to do is to Virginia Warbrick's been arranging these meetings with teachers and, you know, local history groups. And I think teachers have been floundering a bit because they don't know the local history, and historians know it. But so we've got to the point where we think there needs to be a model that shows, you know, if we take a specific topic, this is how material can be drawn together, which teachers can then use to translate to a classroom situation. Basically, so we're at that stage of working on a model, and get then until we've actually got something and then got it out there and got feedback on it. You know, you can keep flailing around for endlessly. And some of the teachers are giving advice on some topics might be better for different levels, you know, year 10 as opposed to year 6 or whatever. So that sort of thing's proving to be quite useful as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Kia ora. Kia ora, Margaret. Thank you for coming in and bringing us that presentation today.
Thank you.
I will move that we receive the presentation. Tōtoko, Councillor Meehan, thank you very much. I'm just going to invite the CE to make a comment on the presentation.
Shall I stay here?
No, you can sit down, Margaret, you're fine, thank you.
Unless I say something wrong, Mark, then you might rush back. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for councillors' information, so the Trust has written to me, along with the New Zealand Society of Genealogy, has also written to me, that my staff had already been talking to me about the matters that were raised here, and actually prior to receiving the letter from the Trust in relation to the City Archivist, I've already asked the team to progress the recruitment of that position. I'm expecting that paper will come back, and I can see Linda in the background writing vigorously, preparing no doubt a position description and those sorts of things to get that right. And that'll come to the senior team very shortly for recruitment. The other items that are actually in there, we do need to have a look at archive storage in more detail, and the issues and questions that have been raised around retrieval and where those archives might sit and what might be held on site and what might be held off site. And then some of the other items I've suggested in the letter back to the Trust, as well as that I'll be sending off to the Society of Genealogy as well, is though I would be encouraging those groups to providing submissions to the long-term plan, because some of those other items are quite, they will have budgets that need to be attached to them, so no doubt we'll hear from Margaret and her team and others around heritage and those matters moving forward as we move into the long-term plan.
Thank you. Moving to comments, I have the Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank the CE for commenting, because I had some notes here. I'm confident the CE and officers are aware of the issues. So thank you for clarifying that. And just want to thank Margaret and the Heritage Trust for your letter and your active participation on the issues along with other groups. Look, I think there's several things here, and I think at the heart of this is just having a better understanding of heritage within the operational side of the organisation. I'd have to say the governance understand it, but I would challenge the management team that we just need better heritage planning within existing structures. It has fallen off. Streetscape is a classic example. Cuba Street is probably our oldest business street in the city. And yet you wouldn't know if you walked down there now. It's been done beautifully. The streetscape's been done really, really well, but the dots weren't connected. It can be fixed with some retrofitting, but it was a missed opportunity. So to our colleagues in operations there, please can we take this seriously, because master planning is another part of heritage needs to be linked in, and we've got a whole lot of village stuff too. When we look at our villages, they have their own stories that need to be told. Councillor Hancock will be telling me about Bunnythorpe's stories soon, but yes, they have their own stories, as does Ashurst, as does Linton, and as does Longburn, and they're all quite unique. And I think that's what Margaret and the Trust were saying. You know, we need to talk up Palmerston North significant heritage. It is quite unique, and in a New Zealand context, you know, our cultural heritage is quite different here to other parts of New Zealand. Our social, our business, our artistic, our military, our sporting, but also the built heritage as well. And the CE of Heritage New Zealand, Andrew Coleman, came and told us that ourselves, that we have got a bit of a gem here, and we sometimes, you don't know what you've got yourself. So I do encourage everybody to take a better look and understanding around heritage. The City Archivist, I know, will get fixed, but there has been a lag there, and just want to acknowledge the library, who have been picking up the gap there really as best they can. but it's also the linked programs with that. Margaret spoke about the staffing as well and that understanding and sort of training aspect. I do wonder if there is a role for perhaps some of the community stuff where the volunteers could help. It does work in other cities and other museums and archives, but that's a program in itself, so it needs some work. The archives, it's a major, it does need to be fixed, and I think the CE summed it up, what is on site and perhaps what is in storage or off-site, but with good access too. I do think we need to look at a hybrid model because we just simply won't be able to afford a mega $1 million archives for stuff that might get looked at once every 10 years. But I do understand that it's got to be really available for those that want to research stuff. I think also the public promotion of our City Heritage Month, and maybe that needs to be widened to Manawatu as well. I look at what Wanganui do with almost zero district council funding, and they've got a fantastic program over there, which is led by the community for the community. So I think there's a lot we could do with the Heritage Trust in that space, maybe as a vehicle for that sponsorship, that extra funding. So all things heritage there, and I just think we need to be supporting it, and thank Margaret for bringing it to the forefront. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just had through you, if I'm allowed, a quick question to the CE before I comment. Just what is the current status of the Heritage Planner?
Through the chair, I might just check with David Murphy around that. I'd have a better view.
Morena koutou, ko David Murphy toko ingoa. I'm the Chief Planning Officer at PNCC. So we do not currently have a specialist heritage planner in the council. That said, heritage comes up across a wide variety of planning projects, and our expectation is that all planners have a good understanding of heritage. Many of you will be aware I've been in the organisation for 20 years next year. We have not in that time had a specialist heritage planner. But there are a number of projects where we've made significant advancements on heritage by planners incorporating that within their everyday work. So during the 90s, there was Greg Vossler, who led a significant amount of work for the council in heritage. Even at that time, he was not a specialist heritage planner. I mean, he had clearly expertise in heritage, but he did a whole lot of other planning projects as well. As it happens, coincidentally, I'm meeting Greg for a coffee tomorrow morning. He's now sort of semi-retired, but living back in the city, so to talk about all things planning and heritage. So, look, in summary, we don't have a dedicated role. That said, our expectation is that all planners are thinking about heritage and applying heritage to their work. As an example, when we reviewed the district plan, Plan Change 1, which was a complete review of the business zones of the city centre, my memory is during that process we added 14 scheduled buildings to the district plan. So that plan change was about the city centre and revitalisation of the city centre, and heritage was part of that. That plan change also introduced the Northwest Square Heritage Area. So the idea that heritage planning can only be done by people with heritage planning in their title is not necessarily the case.
Thank you for that answer. I'll just make a brief comment. Just wanted to thank Margaret and the Trust for the presentation. I think it's very healthy when we have organisations that Council has helped establish that keep an eye on parts of the organisation and parts of our city culture that are perhaps, you know, not the most commonly seen or commented on. And this is a good area where, unless you're particularly passionate about working in local history, you might not be aware of the gradual, I guess, de-emphasis perhaps that's happened as a result, you know, naturally of pressure and staff shortages and all the rest of it. But I think it is a very valuable role that this organisation provides by just being a little bit of a watchdog, albeit one that's bark is probably worse than its bite, but still, I think it's good to have it brought to our attention. These are important issues, and I think it's very valuable to bear in mind that once you've lost a piece of information, the opportunity to preserve it for someone else doesn't come again. So where we might be thinking that, oh, well, history's not urgent, it will always be there and so on. In terms of the preservation of some of these materials, it is urgent, won't always be there. So I'm quite encouraged to hear that the City Archivist position has been recruited for. That's really good news. And also that maybe this has just raised the consciousness, I guess, of everybody around the importance of maintaining not only an archive where the documents and other things are preserved, but actually an archive that's usable, and usable by interested amateurs as well as by skilled historians. So, and I know from my personal anecdotal experience, looking up something in the archives a few years ago, I wouldn't have found it were it not for the staff in the library who were able to tell me where I should be looking and what it was that I needed. So it was very, very helpful indeed. Thank you.
Kia ora. Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and also thank you to Margaret for bringing this to our attention through this committee. I really liked a lot of the things that she said, but my emphasis is probably on the signage boards. I think the signage boards across the city on things that are particularly of heritage to us, I think would be really important. And I think one at the Esplanade would be really great piece for history, and I think there could be a lot of use for something in terms of bringing up pieces of history around our city where a lot of people go, but I think the Esplanade in particular has quite a lot of history for us. But I just think, and down George Street as well, but I think there are lots of parts of the city where we could pick out different things for us, and I just think the signage boards would be a good way to do that for us. So thank you, Margaret, for bringing this to our attention. I think it's a really good presentation. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Margaret, for this today and for the ongoing work you do and your dedication and passion for our heritage and history. I think as others have reflected, we don't always stop to think about the heritage of the city. Some people are active in that space as amateur local historians, and we have a significant professional local historian community. But beyond that, if we don't take time to visibly tell the stories, then people don't know those stories exist. I recently was in Greytown and very impressed by their heritage walk, and exactly that, the signage on local businesses, talking about the economic history of that area, as well as the built heritage that's represented there. And I think there are lots of opportunities. That's something Margaret and I have talked about, and we're pursuing a conversation with Palmy Bid, who are interested in picking that up as a project. But there have been missed opportunities, there is no question about it. And particularly the discussion about Cuba Street has gone on and on and on in this chamber, and we still have seen no heritage signage in that space. It was that particular gap which caused the recommendation that Margaret referenced in her presentation about an annual report on heritage themes. From memory, that was 4 years ago, and nothing has happened. So there are missed opportunities. We are not telling our stories in a way that I think this chamber would like it to be told. And there are opportunities that we will have to prosecute that, I suppose, through the long-term plan. So I'm signalling here, elected members, there will be these programmes coming into our long-term plan debate. Many of you are already aware of those, and I will be looking for your actual financial support for some of the things that you've given your vocal support to today. And on that note, we will, kua tai te wā mō te poti, move to the vote. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Margaret. And we move to our third presentation. Kelsey Higgins, the Community Engagement Officer for volleyball is with us. Thank you so much, Kelsey, for bearing with through this morning. You're going to outline Volleyball Manawatu's annual plan, highlight two major projects, hosting the secondary school volleyball championships and the ongoing development of beach volleyball court facilities at Takaro. Over to you.
Good morning. I want to say thank you to the committee for having me in this morning, and I want to apologize for my voice. I spend a lot more time in a loud gymnasium with teenagers than presenting to board members. I want to start by, I just turned it on.
If not, the staff can do it.
Yep. There we go. Yeah, just a little bit about Volleyball Manawatu. So we are an incorporated society that's affiliated both to our RST, Sport Manawatu, as well as our NSO Volleyball New Zealand. Part of the incorporation of our association only happened 3 years ago, and it was developed to help aid in the hosting of secondary school national championships, which has been hosted here in Palmerston North for a very long time. It's part of why I wanted to be able to present to the council. 2024 is our final year of that contract, and my understanding is the 3-year contract moving forward negotiations will begin next month. As part of our growth, that first year we only had a part-time employee that helped with the tournament. Moving forward, Volleyball New Zealand looks for the association to be able to kind of lead the operations of that tournament if it's going to be part of our long-term planning. Then we're going to have to increase our staff to be able to accommodate year-to-year planning of that. Locally, we represent about 7,000 participants. I know volleyball here is very much seen as a community sport, which is great, but as well as us moving forward in professionalism of our sport, I think some of our participation numbers, as well as the size of the events that we run, needs to be recognized. Sport Manawatu did a survey pre-COVID. I know a lot of our sports are still trying to gain back to our previous numbers, but at that time, volleyball did have the largest participation numbers for our high school athletes in the region, as well as we're the second highest participation women's sport in all of New Zealand. In the last 5 years, we've had a 35% growth in the sport as a nation overall, which is amazing considering what the challenges that we've faced throughout the years of COVID being present in the community. Recently, volleyball actually just took the world record for the most spectators for a women's sport, which was massive. So over 92,000 spectators for an indoor sport. They actually had to move the women's match to an outdoor facility to be able to kick women's football out of that position. Here in New Zealand, our secondary school national championship tournament is the largest indoor sporting event that we host as a nation, and that it's hosted here in Palmerston North. I think that we need to be able to lead better in the space around community recognition of what impact that has for our community. And as the association, we hadn't been able to fill in that space because we were previously more assisting the tournament, whereas moving forward, Volleyball New Zealand's going to look for us to take the lead on those local level goals. Our big goals for this year is that we're able to move more into that leadership space over our volleyball community. The first 3 years has really been more of us trying to liaise with clubs and organizations that already existed. We've done a pretty good job to bring everyone under one umbrella now. And so that umbrella, we're just looking at how we kind of move into more governance and more sustainable model. The two major projects that we're looking at for our year from 2023 to 2024, we have 2 beach volleyball courts down at Takaro Sports Club. That sports club is one of the long-term leases of a sports park from City Council. It was a space that previously was unused. It used to be a croquet facility and had become kind of just an overgrown lawn. We're looking at adding 2 more courts. In beach volleyball, you only have 4 players on a court at a time. So the addition of 2 courts to bring us up to 4 courts just allows the community for more use of the space. As I stated before, Volleyball New Zealand is looking at us to lead the operations of the tournament. For our RST, Sport 102, one of their main goals is for us to be able to host national tournaments here in the city, and so we're looking to be able to get that contract moving forward from 2025 to 2027. Just a little bit more about the beach courts. When they were first established, it was from one of our club community leaders. He had received help from Aaron Phillips from Parks, from City Council. It's really important to us that that space remains a community space. So we're very grateful for use of the CET arena, but it's quite challenging for athletes to be able to get in. It's not a facility they can just walk in and use, and so for us, that beach court space is something that we're looking to be able to provide to them, that they can use kind of free of charge. We're able to maintain it on our own, and that's a big part of why we're looking to expand. When you have a group show up that has maybe 20 players, only having 2 courts isn't really enough space for them. As well as being able to tie into our national body for the competitive and elite sport pathway in volleyball for New Zealand. Our NSO has recognized that beach is our path for that, and so we want to be able to support our local athletes with a facility to be able to train if they want to be able to head down that path. This is just a list of what we're able to deliver this season. It'll be the first season that the association has actually run proper leagues, as well as a tournament series. For us, the cost is very minimal around being able to upkeep that facility, and so we're able to provide a low overhead cost to our participants, which is important for us as a sport that usually requires 12 players on the court in an indoor facility. It also decreases our demand of needing to be able to use the arena. None of our high schools have their own facilities, so we're able to offer them that space. Previously, the only beach volleyball court was up at Massey University, and the only other city court is a grass court at one of our community parks. When we compare that to basketball, it's quite easy to be able to head out and grab a social game with a hoop and a ball, and so we're just looking to be able to provide that as well for our volleyball community. Our larger request from City Council is going to be around obtaining that contract to continue hosting the school championship tournament here. The negotiations on that largely are dependent on the Sport Partnership Fund. That is negotiated on our behalf through the RST. And so while we don't particularly liaise with them, we then deal with our national body around how much money we can actually have to host that. For the largest indoor sporting event in New Zealand, you can imagine there's quite a bit that goes into the delivery of the event. Volleyball has long been run as a volunteer-based sport, and to be able to maintain the level that we need to keep that tournament here, the professionalism of hosting the event is going to have to increase with it as well. One of our biggest concerns is going to be in a 3-year plan. We have to look at what the cost is going to be in that 3rd year to make sure that we're not shortchanging ourselves in getting an agreement that might work for 2025, but come 2027, we actually don't have the appropriate funding, which is a challenge we faced last year. We are about $35,000 short in being able to host the tournament. We were able to get Volleyball New Zealand's support for our association to go out and receive funding, but it's not part of an ideal long-term plan to be dependent on outside sponsors that aren't guaranteed to support the tournament year after year. A little bit about the tournament. So as I said, it's the largest indoor sporting event. It's over 1,700 players with about 2,400 attendees. 93% are from outside Manawatu, so it has a very large economic impact for our community. And we also, 85% support, saying that it's very good to excellent, which is great for us. We look to, always increase what we're delivering in that tournament. We were able to get an economic impact study done last year after the tournament. $180,000 to deliver the tournament is not going to be significant in 4 years from now, if the size of the tournament remains. But we can see that the economic impact that it had for our city, over 2,000% return on investment. And I don't know about any of you, but none of my personal investments have that type of return. As I said, I really just wanted to be here to try and represent those two things that our association are trying to achieve. I know that City Council works with Sport Manawatu and not the sports directly, but I do think that we have to just be able to do a better job of representing what that sport partnership fund is able to achieve for our community. Yep, thank you.
Kia ora, Kelsey. Thank you for coming in and speaking to us today. There are a few questions, if you're okay with that. Good. First, the Mayor.
Sorry,
don't know
Madam
why it won't
Chair,
move with me.
it was me. I was fiddling around with the buttons. My apologies. Thanks, Kelsey. A couple of questions, if I may. Obviously, last year, well, look, firstly, congratulations on what you're doing and growing the community aspect of the sport and participant numbers. It's really promising. Just with the New Zealand Secondary Schools event, and this being the last year of a contract, and I know how competitive that is. What do you think are some of the key things, non-financial, that actually add to Palmerston North and this region being a good place to host? What are some of the things you think?
So for us, as being able to work with Volleyball New Zealand in deciding what regions they would actually ask to host, we're one of the only regions that has a large enough facility to be able to host the number of teams. Hawke's Bay would be a new facility that could look at hosting, as well as there's a new facility going in the South Island. For us, we're fairly centrally located, so in comparison to the two other regions that would try and put in a bid for the tournament, the cost of travel is actually a lot less for teams to be able to come into Palmerston North. They can fly into Wellington or drive, or they can get direct flights into Palmerston North. So we have heard continuous comments from teams saying they would prefer the tournament stay here because the added cost is obviously a detriment to teams' participation. Another, added bonus for us is the proximity of the arena to town. It is very long days at that tournament. We're in the gym around 6:30 in the morning and often not out until around 1 a.m. And so for teams that are in the gym all day, the teams are able to walk into town to be able to go to cafes and get out of the gym for a little bit of a break. And I know at least the facility that is in Hawke's Bay doesn't allow for that. It's quite isolated, and so you'd have a bit of a drive to get into town. I would say one of the maybe negative impacts last year was we did have some challenges around being able to host the number of teams with availability in hotels. I know it's probably a longer term implication, but I don't think that any of the other regions really have better options than we do. Most of the teams do stay fairly central to the city, which is another bonus for us.
What about, having been to a few things, we do the opening ceremonies, the cultural connections. Do you think that plays a part in it as well? Just that, officially welcoming people to this place?
Yeah, I really do. I think I'm an immigrant. I've only lived in New Zealand for 5 years. And so for me, it was a very big part of volleyball growing up. Our national tournaments would have a big opening ceremony. And I know in comparison to other sports that it's not necessarily done. Basketball does when they host. They've said that ours is quite larger. It's a much larger event. I know that Netball in New Zealand doesn't do any type of opening ceremonies with their national championship tournament. We get quite an engagement from the youth in the tournament. They're often doing a lot of selfies and videos. We get them down on the show court dancing. We're able to have local performers come down. So I do think it's a really big part of the tournament, as well as we're able to host a social dance for them at the end. And so it does mean a lot more than just participating in a sport for those athletes. It's quite a big social event for them as well.
And just my final question, you state, or you had up there, 180,000 to run this event. Is that including everybody's salaries from head office and people flying here and everything else?
So that would be the number that Volleyball New Zealand has provided us with. For us, we get contracted through them. It's one of the changes that they're looking at for next year is that we actually provide them a better outlined budget of what it truly costs. The operations of that tournament has run on the backs of volunteers for a long time, which is great. We want that support. But our local leader who has run volleyball in the community for the last 35 years, unfortunately is not at a point that he can kind of manage that on his own anymore, as well as just for sustainability of our sport and professionalism, we need to be able to upskill people to be able to deliver the event.
Okay, so that cost includes, it's a national number?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, Kelsey, for your presentation. I heard the words that you said we were 35,000 short. Can you explain a little bit more what you were saying when you said that?
Yep. So last year, when I guess the first meeting that came from Volleyball New Zealand to our association, what they were asking of the association staff to provide previously had been provided by Sport Manawatu. And so there had not been any conversation around how they were going to financially support our association to be able to deliver those costs. And because it was quite late before the tournament when kind of this came to light, we did come to the point to say, hey, look, we're not going to back out. We're going to deliver the best we can. But we did need to go out to grant funders to try and support our end of operations, which isn't our tournament to deliver. And so we were successful. Sport Manawatu was very helpful in stepping in and helping us aid in getting some funding for the event. But we do know that moving forward, we need to be able to provide a better budget of costs up front to know that we're just doing a better overall planning for the program.
So will you be looking at a better funding model going forward?
Yeah, so a big part for us right now is we're trying to put a better budget together around what staffing an event of that size should look like for us to be able to deliver on outcomes that we'd like to achieve to be able to keep the tournament hosted here.
In terms of that, I mean, because the city gains so much from it in terms economically, would you potentially look at what that would look like? I mean, I'm talking about the accommodation providers gain a lot from what this delivers. Would that be an alternative that you could look towards in terms of getting funding from?
So previously we had not been the leaders in trying to receive the funding or in applying for funding for us as a sports to host that tournament. Our funding from City Council is done through the Sport Partnership Fund, and that is then taken lead by Sport Manawatu, and then we apply to Sport Manawatu, and my understanding is that they have a calculation. My apologies, I would have to get back to you around kind of the real pathway of how that money gets allocated, but it is one for us that we do need to look to make sure that it's more sustainable on a financial model.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Kelsey. I just wanted to inquire a little bit more about Mano Beach at Takaro Park. That facility, I'm understanding, because it hasn't really been well promoted from the park itself, that's a free community access rather than a member opportunity?
Okay, yeah, so Takaro Sports Club, for their lawn bowls community, they do have a membership fee. They also represent billiards is part of that sports club, as well as table tennis, and so each of those associations fit under a shared agreement for the sports park use. For us, the beach volleyball courts, we pay our association membership fee to be able to rent that space off of them. And so for users to come use the facility, we don't require any type of fee from them. For us to be able to set up gear is more just around them being able to liaise with us being able to get down there. We'd love to be able to leave gear up. Unfortunately, it's quite expensive and we've had stuff missing, and so we're trying to work through how we can create a model that enables more of that. Part of this summer we'll be having open hours where gear is out and we have staff down there. For our events, there is entry fees, but that all just goes back into the cost of operating the program. But yeah, so I guess for clarification, to enter anything else within the sports club, they may have an entry fee or membership fee, but for us, for volleyball, it's just free community use space.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Harper, you've popped back in? You can pop out again then. That's the end of the questions. Thank you very much, Kelsey. And it was remiss of me not to acknowledge Kelly Shanks, CEO of Sport Manawatu, also in the room. Thank you.
Thank you.
He kaitape mo tene mo tini. I said that wrong, but the intention was, would anybody like to move the motion? Councillor Johnson. He kaitotoko. Councillor Meehan, thank you very much seconding that. I will open for comments. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just really wanted to acknowledge Volleyball Manawatu and also Kelsey and your team for coordinating the sport here in our city. Really wanted to highlight the importance of those national age group national tournaments. Having that sort of number of secondary school students in our city from across the country does multiple things. That economic driver is actually part of our economic strategies for growth, and the arena underpins that facility to enable that to happen. Volleyball's our largest event, and so as a collective, at one point the figure was like 5 million indirect economic benefit to our city each year, and it's because of these age group national sports tournaments as a large part of that. What it also does, it exposes those students to the perception of Palmerston North that it's actually a great place to be and live, and the excitement and vibrant type of activities that we offer, and it opens up opportunities for our tertiary education as well. So it's great for Massey, it's great for all those other institutes. And as that needs a volunteer network to support to bid for that, I think it's critically important that we do that well. And so the negotiations at the end of the month are key, and when we're talking about shortfalls of $30,000, I just think that's just minor change for the benefit it offers. So I really want to speak into the perspective of what this event offers the city and how important it is, and not to take it for granted. There are other regions out there that are building larger facilities to try and capture the market. Rotorua was one of them, but we're still on the leading edge. And so when we're talking about the number of courts at Arena, I think that's critical. The capacity of not only coordinators like Kelsey, but the volunteer support that the sports engender. And actually, it has been acknowledged, Kelly, with Sport Manawatu are a critical player in this space as the Regional Sports Trust. And so really, I'm just speaking into the endorsement of these type of events and highlighting their importance. Thank you, Chair.
Kia ora. The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, just want to, like Councillor Dennison, want to acknowledge Manawatu Volleyball, Kelsey, but also acknowledge volunteers. So the reason that we're in this great position is because of the volunteers. It's moving towards, as we've heard, it's moving towards a more competitive and more professional environment. But, you know, people like Andrew Curtis, who has been year in, year out running that facility and that tournament like a professional. And just want to acknowledge him and others that work in that team as well. I think, like Councillor Dennison, this is ours to lose. It really is. So we've got to acknowledge that we've done a really good job, that hopefully, I know Tony Marie at CE at Volleyball New Zealand, she's an old squash person, so that's sometimes those connections come in handy. But seriously, it's around what is the package that we're going to put up. Yes, there's some finance there, and that will have to be, as Councillor Dennison said, right-sized. You know, we've got Tauranga, we've got Christchurch, we've got parts of Auckland, we've got Hastings or Hawke's Bay and Napier. We've got everybody, Nelson, everybody wants this. But there's some strategic things that are in our favour. Our central location is, nobody else can take that away from us. Getting in and out, that accommodation. Now, the accommodation, to put 3,000 people into any city, even Auckland's going to be quite difficult at a youth market. But just talking to Councillor Fitzgerald, it's using all of our tools, Marais, campgrounds, everything that we can, that, you know, and it does become a bit of a van city for a couple of days. I mean, you go down Pascal Street and I don't think there can't be a rental van that's free, because they're all there. But seriously, it's around the cultural connections, that opening ceremony, the social aspect at the end, which we do so well, and I don't think could be easily replicated in another area. So we've got to build, that's got to be some of the package, the resource that goes in. I think also the facilities. Now, you know, we spoke about heritage just earlier today. There'll be stuff that comes to us around arena and a master plan there. And I just want to signal that we need to have a look at that too. It needs to be staged because it's going to be some rather large numbers. But if we don't look forward to what we might do in terms of some of this indoor court space, then you know, we may be one of the also-rans. But we're in the box seat. It's ours to lose. We've got to try and secure it going forward. So thank you to Manawatu Volleyball and also to Sport Manawatu who act on our behalf. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair. Tēnā koe, Kelsey, and ngā mihi ki ale. I'm speaking in support of this as well, following on from the Mayor and also Councillor Dennison. Being a teacher, I've gone along to watch the volleyball tournament. I've had students who have participated, and it's just, there's a vibrancy around that activity. There's the connectedness. There's also the opportunity for our students and parents and supporters to watch those who are exemplars and excellence, actually, in the sport. It brings a whole lot. The Mayor is right in terms of, like, the volunteers play a crucial role, but I would hate to see us lose this because it's just run so superbly here. And I think the socialisation aspect for young people is a really good thing, that it's happening here in our city, and that they can connect with others, because there is undoubtedly, regardless of whether it be volleyball or basketball or softball, there's that opportunity to network beyond our own environment. And for young people, that's huge. And so I wholeheartedly support this. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for Palmerston North and for our people. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Councillor Zabelin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Likewise, just hearing this presentation harks me back to our regional sports facility plan, which we heard about in November last year, I think. And I remember at the time we were looking at framework for investment in codes, and that had a growth component. And so I think we've heard a lot of really positive things about growth in this sport, in this code, and especially growth for women. And I don't know that that's been picked up in the code feedback that's been provided for that document, because I just pulled it up, and volleyball has said it's decreasing its membership and it's only catering for about 800 people. So I'm just, I wanted to flag that. I think if strongly positioning for funding and opportunities, then that data should be updated to reflect that it is a growth code, and it is bringing in women, and that it's achieving some of those things that it said that we heard that weren't being achieved a few years back. So just wanted to highlight that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Bellin, very useful. Councillor Anna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, ladies. I'd just like to say that, Councillor Megan and I were down there at one stage, and it was fantastic seeing the crowds. It was amazing, even interesting reading the van names, all the schools. Accommodation, we heard a few stories of a few issues with accommodation where teams had booked and bookings were cancelled, and they were remade and prices had gone up, and teams turning up to places and they weren't up to spec and not matching photos, etc. So, I think maybe hoteliers and retail do need a bit of a message that, it is important to shape up, or these teams will ship out. And, there is other options around the country, as we've heard. So maybe that's something council could put their heads together on that one, and do a bit of a call around or campaign on that basis, and make sure those sort of issues aren't repeated. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mann, last one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's all been said. I just want to echo a couple of things, though, especially Councillor Dennison and his point that 35,000 isn't a biggie for what comes in, and I think we need to be really onto it and make sure that we do hold on to this. As the Mayor said, it's ours to lose. We need to make sure we do what we need to do to hold on to it and keep it here in the city. Thank you.
Thank you all for the comments. Thank you, Kelsey, for coming in and speaking to us. First, who knew that the beach in Palmy was in Takaro? So thank you for sharing that one. I think a concern there about this, the Sports Partnership Fund going forward, recognising we're coming to the end of some really big contracts, and these are significant economically for the city as well as for the sporting endeavours of our young people. And I think links back to me the conversation last week about Massey University. Easy to talk about this being a great opportunity to bring young people into the city to experience the benefits of living here and potentially studying here, but we know that there are continuing issues generally with Massey, but particularly with the provision of their sports qualifications up there as well. So this is a bigger conversation, I don't want to say than just volleyball, because volleyball is very important in this, and thank you for raising it, but it raises lots of issues that are wider than any one particular code that we will have to think about. I notice we have the Sport Manual 2 annual report coming in November, so Kelly, I'm sure you'll pick up some of those threads there, but also as we go into long-term plan in that discussion about things like the Sports Partnership Fund, add into that Arts Events Fund and Major Events Fund as well. The pressures will all come into those funding buckets. So on that, we will look to vote. Thank you. Kua tae ki te wā mō te poti. Carried unanimously, thank you. Ka huri ki ngā miniti. Let's now turn to the minutes. I'll move that the minutes of Culture and Sport meeting of 28 June 2023, Part 1 Public, be confirmed as a true and correct record, seconded by Councillor Meehan. Any amendments to those minutes? Then we will vote to receive those, please. (13 votes in favour with 2 abstentions. Thank you. Move to item 10, which is the report for options to change the Palmerston North City coat of arms. I will invite Desiree Harvey, our legal counsel, and Donna Baker, acting Chief Executive Unit Manager, to come and speak to that. Looks like you're on your own, Desiree. Go for it.
E te himana tēnā koe, nā mema o te komiti tēnā koutou. Ko Desiree Harvey toko ingoa. This report today before you is has come about as a result of public comment from a member of the public on whether or not our coat of arms needs to be looked at or changed to better reflect our bicultural heritage for the city. Most of the information found in this report was actually located at the archive, so I thought I would just note that based on what we had discussed before, and the original letters patent from the 80s are stored there in temperature control, so that's appreciated. The process, which is fascinating and very involved, is set out in the report. In particular, the time that it took was significant, and the cost isn't minimal. Happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you, Desiree. I did want to ask, in your report at 4.1, it says Council sought advice from representatives of Rangitaneo Manawatu on whether a change will be supported, and discussions are ongoing. We heard earlier in public comment that it's Rangitane's strong position that the coat of arms should remain as is. So how do we balance those two comments?
At the time of the report, we had engaged. We'd been to Te Whirikoko to discuss it. Unfortunately, there wasn't a good quorum at that meeting, so we discussed further with Councillor Fitzgerald and Deputy Mayor Marshall Lobb to just get everybody aligned on that. So there might be a bit of an update, or Donna may have something to comment on that note.
Yes, there was also conversations that I had with some of the members of Rangitaneo at different events, plus we sent emails out requesting their views. So we were collating them from various areas, and it was very good to hear from Warren today, because we'd certainly had an email from Wiremu, to think of the name, from Wiremu, supporting that the coat of arms stays the same.
Stays the same. Thank you. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to also raise the issue that come through in deputation around the woman's wearing shoes or having no boots. I think it was boots or no boots. Has that been clarified and decided on?
Yes, it has. Sorry.
So at the time when that was raised, I indicated that at any time we come across where the boot has been left off, the woman will be rebooted, and we are continuing as we find any of those examples to fix it.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm quite happy to move the recommendation there that the council retains the coat of arms with boots.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Deputy Mayor, you wanting to? Oh, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Thank you. Would you like to speak to that, Mr. Mayor? Is that?
Oh no, I think there's been enough discussion about it, and acknowledge Rangitane, and thank you for the commentary, and thanks, Warren, and we'll get the boots on there eventually. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fitzgerald just disappeared.
Tēnā koe te hea mana koutou katoa. Just in support of the Mayor's motion to move that the Council retain the coat of arms. You'll recall back to this committee meeting March the 8th, where Dr. Jeremy Harpeter, lecturer at Otago University, asked a question of our city, and the question being, does our coat of arms reflect biculturalism? And just in support of my Tuakana cousin, Warren Walbrick, I'd like to see that we relay that same information to Dr. Harpiter, just for his own knowledge. I'm pretty sure he'll appreciate that, being of Ngāti Raukawa and Ngāti Huia descent. So he's just in full support of the motion. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Kia ora, Deputy Mayor.
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair. Just I want to thank the council staff, Desiree and Donna, because I know that they did dive deep into the archives and even had to go far afield to get information. And it was quite a process, so I really appreciate what they did do. Tēnā kōrua. Tēnā koe, Madam Chair.
Kia ora. Yes, thank you to the staff for that work. I think it links quite nicely to our discussion of heritage earlier today, where sometimes we don't realise the history of something which is everyday and normal to us. And yeah, we sit under it, we see it all the time, but it's really fascinating to read about the process by which that was established and the very complicated process we'd have to go through if we wanted to change it, which I think we clearly don't. So I'll put back to you, Mr. Mayor, for your right of reply.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And look, can I just, my final comments is, it's a good debate to have. It's healthy to check in. But if I could just say, do a search around New Zealand of 78 council crests or coat of arms, and even out of the 15 odd cities which have a little bit more, I suppose, imagery on it, there are only 3 in New Zealand that visually acknowledge tangata whenua. Dunedin, Hutt City, and Palmerston North. I'll leave it at that.
Kia ora. Ko te whakatonga kei runga that council retain the current coat of arms te tepu. Kua tai ki te wā mō te poti. Let's vote.
It's terrible.
Carried unanimously, and we will now break for morning tea and back in the chamber at 11:10, please. Thank you. Haere, haere, haere mai. Kora koutou, thank you for coming back. Always a pleasant surprise. We'll move to the next item on our agenda, which is item 11, Te Manawa Museums Trust Statement of Intent 2023-26, Revised Finances. I will ask Sarah, there you are, Sarah Claridge, to come and present the report, please.
Kia ora koutou katoa, e te hemana, tēnā koe, ngā mene o te komiti, tēnā koutou. This is the revised report of the Te Manawa's Statement of Intent. I'm happy to take it as read.
And open for questions. And I note we have Te Manawa behind you in force. If there are any questions that you're unable to answer, Sarah, will you invite Te Manawa to come and help with that? Lovely, thank you. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to ask some questions about the financials. So I want to get an understanding if the Te Rangi Whenua program that has been applied for funding is a capital program or an operational program or a mix of both.
I'm just going to have to ask Catherine from Te Manawa to come help.
Kia ora, Catherine. You want to take a seat beside Sarah, and then if we get the microphone in front of you, and if you can just introduce yourself for the purposes of the recording.
I'm Catherine Parsons, the Finance Manager at Te Manawa. In answer to the question, Te Rangi Whenua is partly operational and partly capital. I think, and I haven't got the original submission in front of me, but I think there was 60,000 for caseware, 28 and 12 for operational money, and 35 for lighting.
Thank you. So
and
I've got.
That makes up the 95 in the revised submission.
So I've got that report in front of me. There was a $12,000 figure for the retrofit or refit of existing display cabinet glass. Is that an operational expense or a capital expense?
It's a repair to the operational.
And so as well as the
cabinet, sorry.
And so as well as the 28,000 for object labels and labour as a part of the program, that's been tagged as operational expenditure as well?
Yes.
All right. In that case, thank you very much, Madam Chair.
There are no further questions. Thank you both. You can step back. So, ko te whakatonga ke runga, that the committee agreed the revised Statement of Intent 2023-26 from Te Manawa Museums Trust Te Tepu. I will move that, seconded by Councillor Meehan. Open for any comments. There being none, I will ask you to vote. "13 votes in favour. I think I didn't vote. I'm in favour. Okay, good, thank you. The next item on the agenda, again with Te Manawa, the Te Manawa Museums Trust Annual Report 2022-23. I'll invite Susanna Shadbolt, Chief Executive, with Catherine Parsons, as we just met, Finance and Commercial Manager, and Caroline Tate, Board Chair, to come and present the annual report. Over to you.
Tēnā koutou. We appreciate the opportunity to present the annual report for Te Manawa Museums Trust. Reflecting back over the last year, it's easy to forget that in the last year we transitioned out of the COVID-19 National Protection Framework, which saw the venue restrictions and mask mandates ending. As a result, we saw an increase in visitor numbers, which was encouraging. The past 12 months for Te Manawa have been marked by substantial changes to Te Manawa's management and governance, with my appointment as chair, appointment of our CEO, and due to a restructure, confirmation of a new management team. We are appreciative of how Te Manawa staff have adapted to these many changes and responded to new challenges. This year is our first under the 10-year business plan. Te Manawa has made significant changes with a view to build a more engaging, sustainable and connected organisation. Many of these can be seen in our reporting against the SOI objectives. In the last year, the Trust Board was pleased to contribute to the development of a new strategy for Te Manawa, working with the senior management team to understand the key factors driving and influencing Te Manawa as an organisation. We are looking forward to seeing this strategy come to life. We wish to take a moment to acknowledge our departed long-serving chair, John Falk, for his many years of service, and at the very end as acting CEO as well, and also Noan Te Awi Mohi for her many years of service as trustee and on our collections committee. They've left us in a good place to continue their valuable work. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank PNCC as our main sponsor for your ongoing support and guidance. Thank you very much. And I'll now hand over to Susanna to make some remarks.
Thank you, Caroline. Tēnā koutou katoa. We feel encouraged about the year that has been and positive about the future of Te Manawa. We absolutely value the relationship we have with PNCC elected members and officers, and we greatly appreciate the ongoing support and the strong commitment. As our chair mentioned, and as you all know, the past year indicated a period of change for Te Manawa. We focused our program more on local and collections and developing our own content. We implemented a new collaborative structure. We are about to complete activity-based workspaces to move away from working in silos and promoting cross-team collaboration. We have completed a systems review, and as a result, we are becoming a much more sustainable organisation in alignment with PNCC's goals to be a sustainable city. This includes going paper light by introducing digital office systems, reducing our printers from 5 to just 1, and also engaging with Precycle New Zealand to recycle our paper towels. This also includes a financial systems review and implementing a new system that enables us to be more efficient and sustainable. Some highlights for the year include staging 30 exhibitions and displays, doubling the number from last year, and being more responsive with our program, including an Anzac Day display, the coronation, and also the Queen commemoration. One of the definite highlights was the Sandy Etzet exhibition staged in the art gallery. We also undertook a much needed refresh for the conservatory and the popular Dino Dig, completed our biodiversity garden, and have opened up Manawatu Journeys to create a much more inviting entry that allows for regularly changing displays. Another highlight was a much stronger focus on collections and launching collections online, making more than 5,000 items available. We had a much stronger focus on developing our own content, and with the appointment of a new science curator soon coming from Otago Museum, over the next few years we will work towards establishing a science space at Te Manawa. We were also able to secure a 3-year contract with the Ministry of Education for providing the Enriching Learning Curriculum program. We also launched our inaugural annual magazine at the end of last year, featuring a variety of stories inspired by the Te Manawa collection. And we have also had a number of loans to other organisations, including internationally, to Berlin and Sharjah in the UAE. And starting in the last financial year, we have now secured the Peter Bush Archive for our region, which will be administered in partnership with the Rugby Museum and the Bush family. The disruptions of COVID and its flow-on effects have meant some of our targets were not reached. In the shadow of the pandemic and levels of inflation that have not been seen in Aotearoa for some time, we still face a future that is very uncertain. Nevertheless, public support and our visitor satisfaction remain high, and we have achieved 94% of our visitor target. This is actually a really great result, and we have obtained comparative data from like institutions, which I'd be happy to share with Council. Particularly one organisation which is similar to us, with a much wider catchment and much more funding, had a third less visitation.
So our visitor numbers in this challenging environment are extremely healthy compared with other similar museums. In terms of financial performance, I do need to point out that our actual overall results includes a book adjustment due to the unbudgeted return of 5 pole valued at $100,000 that were on long-term loan from Te Papa. While this is not stated in the officer's report, it is listed on page 43 of our statement and page 113 in your documents. Across the board, our spending last year was in line with budgeted expectations. All revenue activities, excluding fundraising, were also in line with budgeted expectations. The revenue generated from fundraising exceeded previous year results. The major variance in terms of budget was a shortfall in likely fundraising opportunities on page 84 in your documents. It is clear now that the budget target was too ambitious and would likely be unrealistic to achieve even in times of macroeconomic prosperity, especially on an annual basis. In future budgets, the amount of fundraising will be set at a more achievable level. We have to be mindful, though, that external funding levels have dropped significantly since pre-COVID times. As an example, Creative New Zealand and lotteries have reduced their funding levels by more than 50%. However, I do want to point out the effort we have made over the past financial year to raise funds in order to meet this highly ambitious fundraising target. We have applied for a total of $2.75 million. This is more than double the amount applied for in the previous year, almost triple the amount the year prior, and nearly 20 times the amount before then. I'm sure you can appreciate how much time and effort goes into funding and the funding application process. Out of those $2.75 million applied for, we secured $350,000 or 13%, 1-3, which, while welcomed, reflects the difficulty in obtaining external financial support. As a large regional museum of art, science and heritage, it is critical that we recover our capacity to develop our own content and start building on our reputation and legacy. This is what we will focus on going forward by reinstating curators and filling the vacancies the organisation has carried for years. By strengthening our offerings, we will be in a much better position to develop a robust sponsorship program to actively seek and attract funding from local businesses. An immediate future focus will be developing the Te Rangi Whenua Gallery in partnership with our iwi and an exciting new science centre for Te Manawa in partnership with Science Centre Inc. and collaborating with science museums and centres nationwide. Partnerships like these represent the way forward for Te Manawa. We have also begun to implement a revenue strategy. The Brian Elliott exhibition, due to open at the Art Gallery tomorrow night, has a number of local businesses that have provided sponsorship. I hope you will join us for the opening. Again, I would like to thank you for the ongoing support of our museum. Kia ora, ngā manaakitanga.
Kia ora. We do have some questions coming in. I'd just like to start, Susanna, you mentioned just in your comments, and I've noted it in the report, that payroll was less than budget by over $200,000 due to vacancies. Can you give us some background to how many vacancies you're carrying and what the plan is for those vacancies?
I can't actually give you can you hear me? Yes. The exact number out of the top of my head. We have employed curators now. That's something that Te Manawa hasn't had for years, to just develop their own content. So we have filled some positions in with exhibitions for technicians as well. We have employed designers that weren't on staff either for a number of years now.
Thank you. And just, you talked in your comments again about the downward trend, small downward trend on attendance, but I don't think you talked about the significant downward trend for visits to Te Manawa exhibitions at other venues. I wondered if you could speak to that, please.
Certainly. I don't actually consider it as a downward trend, and I think we have to be mindful that the COVID protection framework wasn't retired until September last year. We were still affected by the mask mandates, and that was a deterrent to visitation. It also was, we were unable to host larger groups and events as well, and of course, following from that was a hesitancy, a COVID hesitancy, which affected attendance across our sector as well. In terms of the touring offerings, I think to be honest, there was a lack of staff to actually develop that content as well for these shows, where there were no curators, no designers, very few exhibition and collection staff. And with the restructure, it's really about building up that capacity and that capability to develop that content in-house as well. It does take a few years to develop good touring products, and at the moment the appetite for touring exhibition is probably not what it used to be in pre-COVID times. Our immediate focus, as I have stated in the report, is really the Te Rangi Whenua Gallery and building up the Science Centre, actually building up a really great museum for us, and then focus on the touring side.
Thank you, Susanna. Councillor Finlay has a question.
Actually, two questions, but the third-party revenue you already answered very well, so I understand that. The other one is, with your visits to Te Manawa, is there any way you can separate the Rugby Museum, or is that totally part of the 121,000? So how many of those would have been Rugby Museum visitors? Do you have any idea?
Yes, I do. Thank you for your question. So this year, the Rugby Museum had 7,400 visitors there. So we do add those visitor numbers as well. Pre-COVID, the Rugby Museum had about 10,000 plus visitors. So they haven't been able to go back to those pre-COVID times either in terms of visitation.
Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Te Manawa. I'd like to start by asking a question on page 7 of your 12-month report, or page 77 of the Councillor's report. It talks about a number of targets for the 22/23 year. So in terms of visitor numbers, it had 130,000 target, 121,000 delivered, and then there's a note down the bottom that says 22/23, 77,319 visitors have attended 52% of the overall target. Is that supposed to be 23/24? Like how you're tracking for the year that we're currently in, or what is that supposed to be?
Thank you very much for your question. The finance manager just confirmed it should be 21/22. Thank you.
So those were the figures from the year previous. Okay.
So I can give you the numbers previously. So in 2019-20 we had 100,599. In 2021 we had 135,817. However, 8,000 of that was due to the election, which boosted those numbers. So the actual number would have been 127,817. 21/22 was 77,319, and of course you know the current year, or the last financial year, was 121,914. I do have to state though, in 2021 I think the numbers were very similar. In 2021, which was the hard lockdown, essentially after that lockdown, COVID was eliminated in this country, so the numbers it was basically business as usual after that lockdown.
Thank you for that answer. So just to clarify, it'll be amended for the final report that those brackets on all of those target comments will be amended to 21/22. Brilliant, thank you. I've got another question, if you just bear with me one moment. Possibly an accounting question. Have different rounding methods been used for different tables in this report? As I've noticed several minor discrepancies between the figures in the notes versus the figures in the statement of financial position and current accounts. Is it done automatically or is it done manually?
Thank you for your question. The one that you were questioning is done manually.
Okay. Well, I might afterwards just give you my sheet of paper which has some small mistakes. Is there a reason that the PPE note has been included twice? I couldn't see any difference between the PPE note on 18 and the PPE note on the following page.
What page was that?
That was page, oh goodness, it's 105 of our councillors' papers and 106. The PPE note's in there twice, and I wanted to know if there was something I was missing.
I think you'll find one relates to the previous financial year. So there's the item that, oh, I've got it in front of me. It's page 28.
Page 105 and 106.
Yes, the first one I'm just checking quickly, but the first one should relate to the current financial year and the second one to the previous financial year, but I will check. I'm just looking quickly.
It would appear they're exactly the same
I
table,
think
so if
it
they are
might have
supposed to
been
be
copied in twice.
So if they are supposed to be two separate tables, that'll be fixed.
Yeah, but I think it actually might have just been copied in twice when we've scanned it.
Looks like a duplication to me,
Yeah,
Catherine. I think we
does
can
to me
accept that.
too.
Okay.
Sorry.
No trouble. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora koutou, and thank you for your report. A couple of patai arising for me is around the report back on the strategic objective areas, and specifically on page 74. The first question I have there is around the visitor and market research. And just would like to hear any comment on what kind of insights or major themes are coming through that visitor and market research.
We're just struggling slightly with the difference in page numbers. We only have our annual report, so if you're able to reference...
Page 4.
Thank you.
Sorry, page 4, page 74 on ours. The second box from the top talks about the visitor market research.
Well, thank you for your question, Councillor Barrett. I think the insights are mainly around demographics, age groups as well, where people sort of who visit Te Manawa, where they come from, who visit the website, if we can answer that as well, the locations as well.
And in term, are those the insights that you're after? I guess I'm trying to work out, is the research that you're doing giving you the insight you need, and then what's being done in response to that insight?
We do undertake, for special exhibitions, we do undertake extra studies as well, like economic impact studies, and where we get more information about the demographics of our visitation. And we do have a survey as well, and we are about to develop stronger survey participation in that to get a better idea of who actually visits.
And at this point, how much is that research contributing to your planning?
It is to a larger extent, particularly in terms of the development of the science and the Te Rangi Whenua exhibition as well, and working with the schools.
Right. Thank you. Appreciate that. The final patai that I had was on that same page towards the bottom, and the performance measure around implementing the relationship strategy. And the comment there seems there's been a stock take and some engagement with the founding societies, but could I understand the scope of that relationship strategy, and is there anything else by way of implementation that's been undertaken?
Thank you for your question. We are engaging with the founding societies in particular, and also the iwi, and we have just gone through setting up a new strategy for Te Manawa. So the relationship strategy is part of our business plan going forward.
Great, thanks. And just for my understanding, that it's quite a focused strategy around founding societies and iwi relationships?
It is a very focused strategy going forward as well. So we engage on a monthly basis with the societies, with the founding societies, and particularly with the chairs in a separate meeting as well. And we also ensure that from now on we'll have quarterly or half-yearly meetings where all the societies are able to get together as well. And from November on we'll be much more closely working with Te Whare Koko as well and presenting as part of that.
Great, thank you. Madam Chair.
Kia ora, Councillor Zabelin.
Ngā mihi, Madam Chair, and ngā mihi kia kōrua. He pātai tāku, I had a question just going back to the external revenue target. I'm hoping you can help me understand to what extent that target is related to success in applications for funding on particular projects. Is there a correlation that if you are funding for particular projects that formulates what the amount of expected external revenue might be for a target?
In an ideal world, yes, absolutely. And sort of how the planning goes is the working towards developing a concept for exhibitions, for example, and then that will feed into the future budgets and the targets, absolutely.
Excellent. So in terms of, you talked about in terms of setting the target for the next one, the next SOI, that might include a review of what applications you would be putting forward in the next year?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent, thank you. And the Peter Bush archive as well, is that expected to be an ongoing operational expense in the long term for Te Manawa, just absorbed?
Yes, just absorbed is probably hopefully not the right word, and we won't be able to do this. It is sort of set as a 10-year project. It's a very big project and we would need external funds in order to actually realise it. So we have applied to lotteries for funding and the feedback was that it fits the criteria really well, but the funding application was declined for the reasons that I've mentioned earlier, that the external funders simply haven't got the levels of funding available. We have since gone back to lotteries and hopefully we will be able to secure some external funding for that project as well. Yeah, and our chair will add to that.
Just a bit of a comment in terms of the art space as well. Generally in a private business you would secure funding before you secure a collection. Unfortunately it's not possible to get funding for a collection until you have that collection, and so Te Manawa needed to make the call to secure the collection from the Peter Bush family and then seek funding. We were unable to actually apply for things unless we had the collection in our collection. So you can understand it's a bit tricky when you take on something without the requisite funding, but at least we have the collection to show that we are committed to moving forwards with it.
That's great. Thank you very much. Ngā mihi, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hapeta.
I'm on, so thank you, sorry about that. Thank you, Susanna and Catherine. My question is also around the funding as well. So it's around, the target in the SOI is 368,000 for the coming year. Is that a realistic target?
We hope so. So we have, we've thought about this very, very carefully, particularly considering the last year's budget or target, and so far in the last 2 months we have actually already applied for $580,000 worth of funding levels, external funding levels, but considering the 13% hopefully of success rate, that is probably more likely to be 80,000 that we might get out of those, so we'll see how we go.
So of the percentage of funds that you apply for, is how much percentage would be non-grants? So how much would be more corporate funding that you apply for?
Going forward, it will be a lot more, and it hasn't happened much in the past. So we've currently, with the Brian Elliott exhibition that I did mention, we've secured, it's around 26,000, I think, of business sponsorship for this. and there's hopefully more to come in future. So we are targeting certain businesses and trying to establish that relationship as an ongoing relationship as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to also just reflect on the visitor numbers over this period and acknowledge that the year previous in a fully COVID year was impacted, but yet was still quite a bit higher than this current year we're reviewing. I understand that you changed the opening hours on Monday now being closed, and I understand that's because of staff availability, or is that correct? Can I understand the impact of closing on a Monday if that's had an effect on visitor numbers?
So far it hasn't, and we've had really good visitation this financial year.
Okay. And is that intended that you'll look at reopening once you get a staff capacity, or
It's not
ability to do
necessarily
that?
the staff capacity, it's also enabling the staff to have professional development and to also be able to do work on the floor without having to close for the public either. We aren't closed every Monday, so we are always open for school holidays, public holidays and over summer, and the idea is to look at it after a year and reassess it, and also work with the Rugby Museum as well.
Okay, thank you.
Kia ora. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Tēnā kōrero. It's always a bit weird asking questions when you kind of side on. I know. I'm just acknowledging the, difficult year and the high targeted external revenue that ended up with a deficit of 242,910. But how is that going to, what are you doing differently in this current financial year that will avoid a deficit at the end of this year?
Thank you for your question. I do have to speak again that 100,000 of that shortfall is actually due to the pole that was returned to Te Papa and the value of that pole that it had as well. We are setting much more realistic fundraising targets and levels for the coming year, and if you look on page, was it 84 from memory, of your documents, and you see the 2022 level that was achieved as receipts from other revenue, and the actuals in the 2022 was 336,000, and the actuals in 23 was 344,000. So that is a much more realistic budget going forward, and that's what we are sort of working towards as well.
No, I understand that and I acknowledge that, but in terms of making a balanced budget at the end of the year, are you looking to get income from elsewhere? Are you looking to cut costs? Clearly just putting a number in the budget doesn't, of course, mean that it's going to be achievable in this difficult funding environment. I understand that, but given that you're budgeting for much less external revenue, what else are you doing to try and make this a balanced budget at the end of the year?
Yeah, thank you for your question. We have developed, and we are in the middle of finalising the revenue strategy, and are seeking a sponsorship from particular local businesses as well. Of course, the grant applications, and as I said, we have applied for 580,000 already in the first 2 months of this financial year. So we're doing everything that we can, and of course we monitor our budgets very closely and the actuals, and we have monthly board meetings as well, and if there's any reason to be alarmed, we will certainly make adjustments as well.
Okay, so you're planning to have a balanced budget at the end of the year, and
Yes.
then is the short version of
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all. That's the end of questions, so you can take a seat back in the gallery. Ko te whakatonga ke runga that the committee received to Manawa Museum Trust Board Annual Report 2022 to 2023, Attachment 1 Te Tepu. I will move that. Seek a seconder, Councillor Meehan. Thank you. Open for any comments. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just really wanted to reflect on the year that we've just had, and I guess it would be fair to say we've had some disappointing visitation, and from what was kind of aimed at, and what we were having even during a fully COVID impacted period a year previous, and also the targets for external revenue, actually how far we missed those. And I'm reflecting back onto the document we just passed, which has actually still got quite large sums as far as external funding for this next period, 510, which is a step up again, increasing year on year into sizable sums. Actually, in reflection, wondering how likely that could be. So I think it is important that we keep an eye on that moving forward. But also actually wondering how light those visitation baseline figures were in that document, in the previous document, of aiming for 130, which is actually still well below, or still below what we achieved in a fully effective, COVID effective year. And so I'm just really wanting to draw those two elements for this committee to say maybe we're still aiming too low for visitation numbers for the increased investment we're looking, and also the eye on the line of external funding revenue. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to briefly speak about, or from an accounting perspective on these reports. So thank you to Te Mana for all the work you do and what you've put together, but it is disappointing to have a statement of intent have to come back to us because there were mistakes made in it. It's disappointing to read a report that has a number of mistakes that I've identified. A number of them were minor, but where there are minor mistakes, it opens your mind to the question of, okay, well, are there major mistakes? I don't want to be a councillor that has to ask the questions about how you tag your operational or your capital expenditure, but what we've seen is that mistakes have been made. So I just really want to encourage Te Manawa. I don't know what auditing systems you have on your financials or how you process it, but when I'm having to go through reports with a fine-tooth comb to notice whether the figures are correct, that is worrying. And I'd really just encourage you to make sure as you go through this process for the next year that that everything is correct, because this is a major organisation. We put a lot of confidence and a lot of trust in your work, and I really want to be able to trust the figures that you put in front of us. And I appreciate you acknowledging that an issue was made at the statement of intent stage and having brought it back to us to be refixed. And I just want to say I certainly hope we don't have to do it again. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. I'm still scarred from the statistical analysis of last week, so I'm just glad we didn't go there today. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just want to say thank you to Te Manawa for all the good work that was achieved over the last year, which was significant. Just to push back a little bit on Councillor Dennison's commentary, the visitation figures for what you described as a fully COVID year, once lockdown was over, we were back to normal. There were no restrictions whatsoever. So that is quite entirely different to the following year where there were gathering limits and all the rest of it, which really limited the number of people who could attend events and so on and so forth. So I think, to be fair to Te Manawa, what you describe as high visitation numbers in a fully COVID year isn't actually that. With respect. And the other thing I would like to just mention is that, as Te Manawa acknowledged, they're in a rebuilding phase at the moment. There's been a lot of change, both at the governance level and at the management level, and also amongst staff. And I think it would be good of us to extend a little bit of grace towards a new team doing their best in difficult circumstances. So I'd just like to say thank you for the work that you're doing. There's been some interesting new exhibitions and new ways of doing things, and I think we need to give you time to let that come to fruition. Thank you.
Kia ora. Councillor Zabelin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too, I spend a lot of time at Te Manawa, especially with my children. I think there's been such a wonderful variety of events that's been going on there for all ages, really exciting and quite unusual ones too. And the night at the museum was such a great idea. The night market that's just been there just had was absolutely pumping. So it's really great to see the vibrancy and the out of the box thinking that's being brought with the events that are being put on there. Flagging again, I think that we can expect the operational costs for the Peter Bush Archive cannot be absorbed in the current funding that we have for Te Manawa for the operations. So funding to meet that will have to be secured at some point in the future, and we know that the funding picture has changed a bit, so I'd be very surprised if we didn't hear about that in the future, perhaps in the long-term plan. Previously, when Te Manawa's come to us with a specific funding request for additional funding as well, a number of issues that were raised are still live issues. I think that, again, I think we can expect to hear from Te Manawa later in the piece that to be able to fully reach their aspirations, that we're not quite funding it at the right level. That would be what I would expect to hear. I just wanted to flag that now. Thank you.
Well, Councillor Harberter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just want to echo some of the words that Councillor Johnson said. I think this organisation has done very well in this climate looking back, and I think that the funding area is very tough. It's a tough area to apply for grants in. The Chief Executive did say that they are looking outside of the normal area to not just looking at the grants. They are actually now looking to corporates to apply for funding from corporates, which is exactly what they should be doing. So I do think they are trying very hard to look for funds outside of the normal realm, which is great to hear, and well done for doing that. So thank you to the board, thank you to the Chief Executive, well done for trying different things to find different ways to fund the organisation. Well done, and thank you for all the hard work you are doing. Thank you.
Kia ora. Councillor Barrett, last comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and would begin by echoing appreciation towards the board, the staff, the volunteers, and everyone in those founding societies and beyond that make Te Manawa the treasure that it is. And really great to see the report come through. To my perspective, quite a solid result in quite challenging times. A lot of behind-the-scenes consolidation we will be expecting, and I think rightly so, to see that pay off in the future. There's been a bit of commentary around visitor numbers, and there often is. I find it unfortunate that we kind of get zoomed in on things sometimes and don't necessarily see some of the other really good things, like a doubling of numbers of exhibits and displays, which I think is a very good indicator. And I'd suggest that actually, if we think about that indicator and visitor numbers, one of those is leading, one of those is lagging, and I think this is leading in the right direction. I'm looking forward to the future.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Yes, absolutely agree with those comments. Thank you to Te Manawa, to the board, to the staff, to your volunteers, to our community who continues to support the work of Te Manawa. I think I would like to express our confidence in the board and management of Te Manawa as you work through what has been some challenging times, and I think we continue to see some ripples from that. I did just want to note the ongoing issue that we have as council with the buildings that you occupy, and noting that that comes up particularly in the performance measures around audience-focused experiences. We're inviting people into earthquake-prone buildings. I wouldn't be surprised if that has its own impact on visitor numbers. And also noting that even with your increased offering in the art gallery building, that building itself has significant issues about the kind of exhibitions that we can put in that space because of the issues around climate control, for example. So I noted your enthusiastic statement in the report, which says Te Manawa will work with PNCC towards a new, purpose-built, accessible and sustainable Te Manawa complex. And I add my voice to that aspiration as we look to go forward into our LTP discussions. Thank you for the work that you do for council. Thank you for the work that you do for our community. We do appreciate how you hold our stories and tell them on our behalf. And I will ask you to vote on the recommendation that I've already read out. Thank you. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Rārangi take 13. We're going to move to item 13 on our agenda, which is the Memorandum on Play Policy, the Annual Implementation and Monitoring Report 2023. I'll invite, who've we got? Manumea Jury with Anton Carter coming to speak to that. Kia ora, Manu.
Tēnā koutou katoa I te rangatira, ko Anton Carter toko ingoa. My name's Anton Carter, I'm the Group Manager Community Services, and it's great to be able to be here today to present the Memorandum Play Policy Annual Implementation and Monitoring Report for 2023. Firstly, I'd just like to introduce Manumea Jury, who is our Play Advisor. Has been in the role since February and is on secondment from the events team, and she sits within the community development team. I'd just also like to acknowledge Stephanie Velvin, who's not here today, but just acknowledge her work in terms of preparing the report and also supporting Manumea in the role, and also would like to acknowledge Sport Manawatu for their ongoing partnership with the mahi in this area. I was just thinking how we could introduce play into the chamber as a practical way to highlight the importance. And I thought it might be appropriate to ask everyone to stand up and we could play a game of tag. I think we'd all like to see that, but I thought it's probably not appropriate to do that. So
I think that the Chief Executive was about to intervene, so we'll move on.
Bull rush. So now I'd like to pass over to Manumea and she can present the report.
Kia ora koutou. E te hia mana tēnā koe, ngā mena te kōmiti tēnā koutou. Ko Manumea Jury tōku ingoa, he kai hāpai whanakitanga hāpore, ngā mahi a te rehia taku tūranga mahi. Acknowledgements to the Chair and members of the committee. Thank you, Anton, for the introduction. My name is Manumea Jury, Play Advisor here at Council. I'd like to start off with some key highlights of the report. So firstly, through the establishment of the Play Advisor role earlier this year, the Play Policy Implementation Plan was developed and approved by Council. The key scope of the Play Advisor role is to maximise cross-unit collaboration, ensuring we as a Council support play provision across our city and achieve the Play Policy objectives. Key progress has occurred through the revival of Council's internal Play Champions network and the establishment of Council and Sport Manawatu's local Play Champions network. Current and future focus areas extend across various Council LTP projects and programs, and the primary focus will be around the City Centre Play program. Happy to take questions.
Kia ora. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Tēnā kōrua. Just a question on page 119. The table at the top, it talks about when referring to improving ways to engage people of different ages, stages and needs. Play Policy Implementation Plan has identified critical council frameworks to target. Can you just give a bit more information about what frameworks might be being targeted to engage people of different ages, stages and needs?
Thank you. So we've tried to interweave throughout the implementation plan play that acknowledges all ages, backgrounds and abilities. That's one of the unique things about the play policy in comparison to other councils around New Zealand, we're one of the only ones that acknowledge play is for all ages, abilities and backgrounds. So that's something that we've just tried to set throughout the entire implementation plan. Anything that refers to play, we're referring to something for all ages, abilities and backgrounds. So everything through things like our City Centre Play program, we're looking at play opportunities that are for all ages, not just specific to tamariki.
Thank you. So where it says that the plan has identified critical council frameworks to target, are there specific council frameworks that you've got targeted? And which ones are they?
Yep. So we'll look at the City Centre Play program, and we will look at things like our various policies or strategies that come up at given times. So, for example, if we've got the public arts policy under review, we would look to get play referenced in that policy, and then looking at play for the all ages, all stages backgrounds. So examples like that.
Okay, so it's kind of being nimble so that when an opportunity comes up throughout the year, you can add this sort of play layer onto it.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Kia ora. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions starting on page 130 of the papers. Sorry, page 8 of your implementation plan, if that's easier for you. Item 6 there talks about the City Centre Play program, and it talks about how to use budgets as far back as 2006. I just want to get an understanding of what's been going on in that space for the last 17 years. So how we've ended up as a position where we're using budgets from 2006.
Page 130. One moment.
No worries.
I don't think I have the right page.
Page 8 of your report, page 130 of Councillors' papers.
Oh, okay, so my understanding that's the budget number. So the budget.
It's budget number 2000.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, my apologies. I was reading that wrong. I was thinking, goodness, 2000, it's a long time to be holding a budget for. All right, apologies for that then. On page 140, oh no, that's where I've written it. So reading through your implementation plan, I got to the end of it and felt a sense that there wasn't a lot of doing. And so looking through what you've got in there, there's 57 actions. 9 of them are roughly marketing and communications. About 10 of them are talking to or engaging with someone. 30 of them are identifying or developing something, and only 8 of them are sort of tangible doing something. Is that just a factor of the role being new, and that we expect next year, this is a year for developing all of these plans and identifying all these strategies, and next year we'll see a lot more tangible sort of doing results, or is...
Yeah. So thank you for the question. So when the role was developed, the scope of the role was intended to have an inward-facing focus and looking at and advocating, advising, or supporting council units. So that feeds into that aspect of the play advisor role is looking to maximise cross-unit capabilities around play. With the acknowledgement that we have the 0.5 position through Sport Manawatu, who has that external facing and the delivery aspect of that role. So that mixes with the intention that the play advisor role within council will support Sport Manawatu's play systems lead, but primarily have that inward facing focus.
Appreciate that explanation and understanding. And then just one final question for me to get a feel for sort of how your role works. On page 151 of our councillors' papers, it talks about the resurfacing of Te Maraehine's clock tower. And there's a comment here that says the geometric forms of the patterning will encourage playfulness in and around this important space, aiding city centre vibrancy. I just want to get a feel for what that means, just as an example of what the work you do.
Yes, thank you. Good question. So I guess taking a step back in the play sector, we talk about what is playable and what is playful. So playable takes quite a asset-based approach, which is critical if we're trying to look at developing our play provisions in the city. A playful approach is something that's perhaps more nuanced. It's maybe something that's more implicit. It's perhaps more of an attitude or a modality around sparking imagination, sparking joy, which feeds back into how we define play. Play is defined as that intrinsically motivated, often we call it purposeless, in terms of there's no intention around why we play, we just do it because we love it. And so playfulness feeds into that aspect of sometimes it's the look, it's the feel, it's the colours, it's the way we design objects, the way we place them in a space to spark that creativity, that joy, that delight is something I often refer to, which is difficult when you're trying to point to specific outcomes. It doesn't quite fit in certain contexts, but yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for accommodating my mistake, Madam Chair.
Easily made. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora kouroa. Thank you for the report. Manamia, could I take from the response to Councillor Johnson's question that you'd had the chance to kind of look around the country and see what's happening in other places?
Yes, so just a bit of context. So Palmerston North City Council was one of 5 councils that was selected to be part of Sport NZ's play or national play workforce. So we were one of the first 5 in the country, and that is slowly expanding out as they look to expand that workforce. So yes, we're well supported from a national perspective and through Sport NZ, through their links to a global play sector or network. So yes, there's a fairly decent level of support through those avenues around developing this role in terms of the understanding of what's happening at a national level, but also at a global level when it comes to play.
Great, thanks for that explanation. I'd just be interested to hear your perspective, in your professional opinion, who's doing well in this space, and what are some of the key kind of things that you're drawing inspiration from?
I think we're doing pretty good.
Not to suggest that we aren't, but there's always the opportunity to learn from others.
And when I say we, I mean a collective as council. But in all honesty, I think like we can look at some of our examples around the works that our urban planning team did around placemaking is a really good example of what is playful versus playable design from a citywide perspective. From an international perspective, the likes of Wales, Scotland are kind of held up as the pinnacle in a way of the work that they are doing in that space, developing a national play strategy in Scotland. So yeah, those would be kind of the examples that are referenced frequently that we look to kind of integrate within a New Zealand context.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you both. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Zabelin.
Thank you. Ngā mihi kia korua. Ko tahi pātai anake aho, and just one question from me. Looking at those 3 budget lines and noting that they and the policy focuses heavily on city centre play and activities operating out of libraries, I received a letter recently from some children who play a lot in Savage Reserve, and they just were requesting some activities, maybe some goals or some sort of thing. Wondering what capacity these budget lines or the policy has to be nimble to take Councillor Johnson's word there, to be nimble to requests like that if they're not based in the city centre or part of the libraries.
So yeah, that's right. The city centre play program and its attached budgets are bound by the boundaries of the city centre, Te Marae o Hine, Railway Land, and those key ring roads. but there is support through the likes of Sport Manawatu's Tū Manawa Fund. So apologies, this is a Sport New Zealand fund that is administered by Sport Manawatu. And within the Tū Manawa Fund, there is a certain amount specifically dedicated for play funding applications. So there is options there. But yes, in terms of council's direct investment in play budgets that are citywide, yeah, there is that gap there.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and tēnā koro. And thanks for the report. I've just got a question, and I hope I haven't missed it in the report here, but can you just tell us perhaps what's happening with the play streets that we've talked about in previous years?
Yes, so currently we're at a stage where we have been working, well, since the establishment of the Play Advisor role, we've been working with Waka Kotahi through the Sport NZ Play Streets coordinator. So developing those relationships to understand where we are at in Palmerston North. The work that has been done to date is that we've connected with a social service provider in Palmerston North to look at developing a Play Streets pilot in the neighbourhood of Roslyn. That's just their area of focus, with the hope that we could then expand out, connecting with other social service providers to deliver Play Streets, not just in Roslyn, but then eventually across the city. Yeah, so continuing to work with Waka Kotahi around how traffic management plans are put in place for that, and then continuing that relationship with that social service provider to launch, hopefully, over the summer period, a few play streets.
That's great, thank you. Madam Chair.
Thank you. I just had, it's not even a question about the report, so bear with me. This is a great look back, but my question was, we've got Play Week coming up in November. Are you able to tell us what we can look forward to in that?
Yes, thank you for acknowledging National Play Week in November. The dates are set at the 6th to the 12th of November this year. So through the pop-up play budget, we would like to activate the Multicultural Play Festival, Tai o Penga Arehia. So we would like to use this festival as an opportunity to celebrate our cultural diversity through play. So we're working alongside the likes of Manawatu Multicultural Council, Global Parent Supports, and some other amazing providers in our city to hopefully activate an event that will bring play and games from around the world to share with our communities here in Palmy.
Kia ora. Oh, see, you would like to comment.
Yeah, perhaps through you, Madam Chair, is that that's the appropriate opportunity for a game of tag with the elected members as well.
Yes. Yes.
Maybe for discussion later. Kia ora. That's the end of the questions. Thank you both for presenting that, and well done, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
He kei tape mo tēnei mono, I'm not moving motion. I am going to go. Ko te whakatonga kei runga that the committee received the memorandum titled Rehia Papaioia, Play Policy Annual Implementation and Monitoring Report 2023, presented to the Culture and Sport Committee on the 13th of September 2023. I will move it, seconded by Councillor Meehan. Open for any comments. I would start by saying I just had a little bit of implementation plan envy when I considered the heritage discussion earlier today, and thought actually in reading through the excellent implementation report here, it would have been interesting to see if we could have swapped out the words play for heritage at any point and seen if we could have achieved the same kind of reach across council projects, plans, budgets that have been achieved in this way. I think this is showing a really innovative and engaging way of working into the bits of council and pulling a conversation together across the different strands of work that we do. And well done to you, Madam Mayor, on pulling that together for us. I really enjoyed reading the report, and it gave me a lot of confidence that we are going to give effect to the aspirations of having a play coordinator. So thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I think it's rare that a report gets so many smiling faces around the table in council. So that in itself is a success, I think. But I'm really heartened by the fact that we are, and I say yet again, leading in an area of development, nationally. So, we were one of the leaders in welcoming communities. We are, genuinely a leader in the play space, and particularly in the way that we define play as being for all ages and not just for Tamariki. I just really like this kind of overlay of play onto the business as usual stuff, where, something might, project might be being done in a particular place, and some advice or some, thoughts for consideration from the play advisor could lead to play being incorporated in that project. And it's quite a sort of mature understanding of play, moving well on from, I guess, what play was 50 years ago, where we built, a pocket park in every suburb. And it's become a lot more integrated than that. And I think particularly for seniors as well, play for seniors is an area that can work really well in terms of helping people to move from feeling isolated or not being able to, connect with other people in the community, to move out into a public space to engage with some, playful activity. So I think this is a really joyful project that we can get behind, and I was very, very heartened by the report and the answers to questions, and I think I'm looking forward to seeing what more happens with it. Oh, and I particularly am looking forward to the play week with pop-up play from different countries. Sounds fantastic. Thank you.
Kia ora. Councillor Zabelin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to agree. It was a very cheerful report to read. Quite a lovely experience. I would like to explore those opportunities to match up specific requests for play to appropriate fund or advocacy body where we can, especially where these requests are coming from children. It's such a great way to foster advocacy in young people for and a relationship that we could be nimble or responsive, that we can build positive associations when there's a group of kids who have a specific request, that there is somewhere they can go. If they can have a positive interaction and get results and make a difference in their neighbourhood, then I think that has a broader effect than play, but play could be the entry point for these children to learn about testing their advocacy skills. So I just really want to thank the children of Savage Reserve area for writing to me. It was a great letter, wonderful to receive. Mirabarak, Corbin, Marcus, Deesia, Bentley, Shan, Noah, Momo, Mawa, Hamish and Cameron. Just thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Kia ora. Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks the staff for the report that has come through. And I know that we had a little presentation at the welcoming communities around this as well. So it's good to see a number of, a range of activities being provided in our city, which also goes a long way in enhancing social cohesion and community well-being. And personally, I'm very much interested at the city centre fixed play development, and I'm keen to see what's going to happen in that space. For those of you who actually spend a lot of time at the square around the summertime, you'll see how beneficial these plays are, and seeing a lot of community groups coming up to get involved either in basketball, volleyball, and the likes. And just like Councillor Johnson mentioned earlier on, I'd like to see a diverse range of activities that cater for all ages, not just Tamariki or young people. And I'd like to see also inclusive and friendly plays being part of a CBD. And personally, I would love to see more basketball hoops in our CBD. There's only one basketball hoop, and a lot of young people have come to me and said, you know what, Orphe, I mean, from Boys Eye and other schools, you know, that have come, and I mean, just having one hoop in a CBD, there's competition to sort of access that one hoop. So probably seeing more hoops around the CBD that will sort of eliminate that competition. That when someone is already there, another group has to wait, 30, 45 minutes before they can access that hoop. So personally, I would love to see more of that. But overall, thank you for the report, and I look forward to seeing what's going to happen in that space. Cheers.
Kia ora. Kua tai ki te wā mō te pōti. Now it's the time to vote. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Let's move to item 14 on Te Rarangitake, which is Bryce. You're up with the Memorandum 2023-24 Maintenance and Renewal Plans and Budgets for Cultural Facilities. Bryce Hoske coming to speak to that. Bryce, of course, Group Manager, Property and Resource Recovery. Is that the role you're playing today? Excellent. Just to be clear.
I worked out the technology. That's good. Kia ora koutou, councillors. This is a annual report that's produced from the Property Department that talks across the cultural facilities portfolio. Notably, the Central Library is not included. Council, back when they requested this report, opted to remove that and put it in its own separate program, of which the work is delivered for, so hence it not being mentioned in this report. Look, happy to take this as read and answer any questions.
Kia ora, thank you, Bryce. I wanted to ask, as we've decided already how the earthquake-prone buildings will be prioritised, how will we see the work for the earthquake-prone CCOs reflected into this report?
Excellent question. Essentially, the closer we get to the delivery timeline of the seismic work, there'll be a number of decisions we'll have to make, and I guess the closer you get, the more of those things you may choose not to do. For instance, there would be no point replacing a roof a year before you were going to rebuild something. But essentially, a lot of those decisions are made on risk and the occupants and how far away that work is. So if we were 10 years away from Kasha Birch being seismically strengthened, for instance, we'd be doing a lot of work now because essentially they have to continue to occupy that building for another 10 years in that example.
So this is useful for a one-year view, but I'm wondering whether actually, because of the situation we're in, it will be more useful to have not just what's happening this year, but a kind of commentary on the shape of the work coming, because that informs how these things land. Is that possible in this report, or?
Well, it could be. A lot of that is I guess will be reflected in the upcoming LTP, so that will give direction in that sense. And you'll see as that work is being done, it'll be prioritised and planned accordingly. I suppose we could try and expand this report to provide that. However, there'd probably be a lot of repeated information given it is on an annual basis.
Thank you for that. Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Probably along the same sort of lines. I see here Square Edge Building, office aircon upgrade for 33K. It's a big office. Is that the whole building?
It's not the whole building, but it is more than an isolated office. I guess it's reflected over a number of different areas that are used for office-based activities as opposed to the cafe or an art gallery.
Okay. My next part of that question was how it fitted in with the earthquake prone, and I think you've already covered that off, so thank you. My final question is, do we have an equivalent for sports buildings as what we've got here with the cultural facilities? Do we have an equivalent on maintenance and budgets for sports buildings? Facilities?
In terms of programs to deliver work, or in terms of a report like this?
A report like this for maintenance and budget work on council-owned sports facilities?
So we definitely have budgets in place and programs of work to be doing what needs to be done. In terms of a report that explicitly talks about this, no, this report is quite unusual in that respect, because it was a specific resolution of council to do so and start bringing forward this report. For all other areas of the portfolio, I don't think we provide a report like this. You know, in context, if you looked at all of the buildings that property owns, we've essentially split them into 6 different categories. Everything from operational buildings through to cultural, through to housing. I guess if we were to provide that those reports on all of that, that would be quite a hefty report load.
No, I appreciate that. I was only asking for sports. That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hapeta, last question.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Bryce, when do we see the risk assessment associated with these buildings on 3.1? You did mention it to the Chair. So when do we understand what is the risk to customers in terms of going in and out of these buildings? So, I mean, we've got a list here in 3.1, but what is the risk?
When risk in respect to seismic, are you referring to, or risk in terms of those projects going ahead?
No, not in terms of risk of going ahead, more in terms of our liability of not doing the work.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, if there's any kind of health and safety risk or legislation risk or anything like that, that's ultimately prioritised first and foremost. So things like fire upgrades and the likes you'll see over the last few years and will continue to be prioritised and undertaken because that work needs to be done. It's also quite often a precursor to some of the seismic work as well. So you could either do it all at once, or quite often it's a much easier consenting pathway to do it ahead of time, especially in respect to fire upgrades. If there was ever any risk for access of customers or a building was unsafe, then that would be reported separately and dealt with separately. All of these, probably the risk I was referring to is more around risk of sunk costs more than risk to customers. Using my example from before, I wouldn't want to be recommending a $1 million roof replacement if we were then going to rebuild the building the following year. That being said, if that was 12 years away, maybe we would go ahead and replace that roof now to lessen the likelihood of any kind of leaking or those kind of things causing further damage in the meantime. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Sort of.
Got it. Thank you. No further questions. Thank you, Bryce.
Thank you.
So I'll move that we receive the memorandum. I feel like there's a move afoot beside me. 2023-24 maintenance renewal plans and budgets for cultural facilities. Seek a seconder for that. Councillor Meehan. I'll open that for comments while the mysterious goings on go on. Oh, I thought you were a ghost. The Mayor would like to comment.
I've been called some things, but not a ghost. But thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Bryce, for the report. Look, I think it is quite helpful that we do have an understanding of this stuff, and not trying to delve into the operational side of things too much. But I know you all get asked, when's this being fixed? When's that being fixed? And the cultural facilities, sporting facilities, actually all facilities around a council ownership, we get asked. We're the public face. And so I do think that there is some responsibility on some communication here. So thank you for doing that, Bryce and your team. And actually, it just shows that we are, to put into Councillor Hapeta's words, we are taking the risk seriously and doing things that need to be done. Would be good to actually get an understanding of what year 2, 3, 4 is going to look like. But I suppose we're going to have that debate in the coming months around the LTP. I just want to signal around the earthquake strengthening. Our asks, our city regional manifesto does actually signal to MB and the government parties to have a real serious look around the legislation, the timing of that, because there is going to be some real pinch points for Lower North Island, top of the south around earthquake strengthening. And unfortunately there's going to be a whole lot of casualties, and it'll start with the small towns, then it'll come to us, and then it'll go to the capital. So it does need to be looked at in a more pragmatic way, and perhaps timing options for various parts of New Zealand. Thank you.
Good. Elected members, you'll see a second recommendation appearing there from the Deputy Chair and Councillor Wood, that the Chief Executive be instructed to present an annual maintenance and renewal plan and budget for council-owned sports facilities, excluding the arena, to the Culture and Sport Committee. The Chief Executive would like to comment on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do understand the sentiment that's been presented here and wanting to receive reports on maintenance and renewal programs. Council has received quarterly reports from us on a number of items, including the operating budgets and how we're going in specific areas. I'd perhaps just add that whether or not there's another way of being able to present this rather than having to draft additional reports in this regard, it's your decision as to what it is you ask us to do, and I'm happy to consider that. But we have a lot of things on the go at the moment, and providing additional reports for, I'm not quite sure what additional benefits you might get from it. However, I'll leave you to make that call on that.
Thank you for that. Opening for comments on both, either. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Just really a question, I guess, in terms of the second motion there. What number of facilities are we looking at, and can I really get a grip on, I guess, the complexity and the size of that particular motion? Thank you.
I imagine the answer is that we don't know until we start writing the report.
Through the Chair, that is quite a potential. It's kind of like how far would you go into? Our asset management plans associated with each of our facilities. So we do have asset management plans that you sign off as well, that detail out what work needs to happen on various different sporting facilities. I understand, obviously, excluding the arena in here. But the detail that goes in behind that is quite extensive. So I would imagine there'd be a reasonable amount of work involved in pulling out the specific budget details associated with that one.
You done, Councillor? Is that it? Oh. Oh, no, I've given the wrong person the microphone. Hold on.
Yeah, I guess my subsequent question to that is probably to the mover really is, would they be amenable to actually changing that to a scoping report to actually so we've got an understanding of the implications for officers? I'm just a little bit reluctant to pile more work onto council officers at this point in time.
Councillor Mann?
Yeah, I'd be happy for anything. See there was an alternative option. What is the alternative option?
Through the Chair, it's perhaps through our, maybe just having to think through our quarterly reporting, which provides budget details about how well we're performing in terms of maintenance and renewals against budget. It's not going to specifically pull out what sporting facilities, because those budgets are kind of lifted up a little bit from where they currently are. I guess my question back is, what is it exactly that you are trying to achieve by having an additional report provided around maintenance renewals of sporting facilities.
Well, the bottom line is getting a handle on just how many council-owned sports facilities are out there and what needs to be done to them and what is being done.
Bryce would like to comment. Right.
Sort of an awkward situation. I'll have to stand and hold at the same time. Well, to give some context, if you're only talking about buildings, there is a bit of clarification. Are you only talking about recreational facilities, or are you wrapping in changing rooms? And so there's a few dynamics in there as well, but essentially you could be talking anywhere between 40 and 70 buildings. So if we were to provide a report like this, that's actually quite a reasonable workload of items. And the way the budgets are structured as well, there is a degree of fluidness, I suppose. So if something occurs, or if there's been an event and there's some damage, we may need to prioritise some of those budgets around and I guess deviate away from the plan that I would be putting forward to you anyway. So just as a bit of added context.
Thank you, Bryce. That's helpful. And I think there is a concern here that we've not quite nailed the scope of what's being looked for here. Councillor Meehan?
On the advice, where we sit at the moment, the Secretary and myself have agreed we'll pull it at this stage and look for a bit more advice on it before we go any further.
I think that's sensible and pragmatic.
Perhaps through the chair is that perhaps Councillor Meehan and Councillor Wood catch up with myself and officers and just have a further discussion about how we could achieve the outcomes that you're perhaps looking for.
Thank you. A few councillors in the queues, but we've lost a recommendation now, so you might want to take yourselves out. Excellent. Because you're standing between me and lunch and a couple of workshops. So, Councillor Harpeter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to be brief. I'm worried about the list on 3.1. It's a long list of 964K to get completed, and I want to see them all done. So what I was worried about when I said the risk, it's more about the risk of what doesn't get completed from that list, and that's probably what my worry is, because the risk of we want all of those things done, and the risk of those ones that won't get done, and what's the priority of those ones that are on that list. We want them all to get done. So that's where I was coming from when I said the risk. So I do worry about the ones that aren't going to get completed in the financial year that's been stated here. So that's where I was coming from when I talked about the risk as well. So we do want them all to be done, but they're not going to be all done. We know that, being realistic. So that's where I was coming from. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Dennison.
I still wanted to comment on this because this would seem like one of the outside reports that we're capturing a small part of our asset base, when the asset management plans are way more broader, and that's what feeds into our long-term planning for budgets and for the work programs. And so I didn't want to necessarily go down that, so I'm happy that it's been withdrawn, but I would also flag that maybe this one also needs to be reviewed, that it doesn't sit outside and everything else needs to catch up to it as an ongoing report. And so really just wanted to highlight, we did have some work reported through a previous term actually probably 5 years ago, that was reported through the Audit and Risk Committee around the work that they were doing to delve down into the asset management plans to make them more robust and get the financial costings a lot more current, because they were just global back of the envelope sums and they weren't keeping up with inflation, and when we were coming to do the annual budget they were found to be wanting as far as having enough provision to cover the needed work. And so I just really want to flag to have that as part of the series of updates for us around the whole of asset management plans and the levels of service around that. I think that's a better place to keep our eye on. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you for the comments. I'd just say this recommendation, I continue to support the need for this report because it came out of recognising that these cultural facilities are tenanted by our CCOs. And so the importance of bringing that through this committee was to provide that connection and visibility to our CCOs who are also reporting to this committee about the work that council as the landlord was planning to do with them and for them in that facility. I could certainly see a parallel need in the sports area if it's buildings where council is the landlord and it's tenanted by somebody else, but that might be a question for scoping as we look at that. So I will ask you to vote on this recommendation in front of us. Thank you. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Ka huri ki committee work schedule. Ko te whakatonga ki runga that the Culture and Sport Committee receive its work schedule dated September 23, te tepu. Any comments? No comments. The only thing I will comment is that you'll see that item 11 has been withdrawn. That was about the Artist in Residence scheme. Events have overtaken that somewhat, and instead we'll be looking to seek a presentation from the Summer Shakespeare people in early 2024. But that is all I would add to that. And so, kua tai ki te wā mo te poti. We need to move it and second it. I'll move it. Councillor Main will second. Carried unanimously, thank you. Nō reira nā mihi nui ki a koutou, e nā mana, e nā reo, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. And to finish with our karakia, kia putu ki te whaio, ki te au marama, whakamoa ki a tīna. Homie, huie, tai kie.